Hey, what's up? It's Cute What If? This side. Today we will be seeing what if Senju joined Class 1A. Before we move ahead with the FIC, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. Many years ago, a phenomenon known as quirks began to appear, leading to chaos, disorder, and crime, as there was no one to combat those who misused their powers. This changed when a powerful man named Hashirama Senju rose to confront these wrongdoers. His actions inspired many, encouraging them to stand against evil. Thus, the term hero was born. Over time, Hashirama and his brother, Tobarama, established a system of heroes to combat villains. However, a natural disaster struck when a giant meteor hurtled through space toward Earth, threatening all life. On that fateful day, Hashirama Senju sacrificed his life to save everyone. His sacrifice and the life he led caused many to regard him as a god of heroism, so much so that his name became synonymous with the term hero. He became the ideal for aspiring heroes, including figures like All Might. Now, M.N. Senju, the great-grandson of Hashirama Senju, aspired to live up to his legacy and become a hero as remarkable as he was by attending UA. M.N. possessed a quirk known as chakra, granting him the ability to use the 5 basic nature transformations. He also had access to the wood-style Kekkei Genkai and could utilize medical ninjutsu. His sage art allowed him to absorb natural energy to enhance his jutsu. His mother, Tsunade Senju, was a powerful hero with 2 quirks, chakra and a strength quirk. Now retired, she was revolutionizing the medical field with her incredible healing abilities. His father, Dan Kato, had died protecting citizens from a formidable villain. M.N.'s personality was energetic, a bit childish, easygoing, caring, compassionate, confident, and sympathetic. He could be serious when necessary and was analytical, reflecting the traits of Hashirama Senju. At the age of 15, M.N. had been homeschooled by Tsunade, who taught him everything she knew about ninjutsu, medical ninjutsu, chakra control, and the essence of being a hero. His mother's friends, Jiraiya and Orochimaru, also contributed to his education. Through Jiraiya, M.N. learned to utilize sage art, and from Orochimaru, he acquired knowledge of various forbidden jutsu, including reanimation techniques. Until he turned 10, M.N. kept his ability to access wood style a secret until Tsunade caught him practicing. She then entrusted him with Hashirama's scroll containing wood style techniques for proper learning. They agreed to keep his access to wood style a secret until a moment arose when he would need to use it to protect others from villains. Now, M.N. was preparing for his first day at UA. Tsunade urged him to get out of bed, emphasizing the importance of attending the prestigious school. Despite his reluctance to wake up early, he understood the expectations placed upon him as a Senju, especially with a great-grandfather known as a god of heroism. M.N. was determined to live up to that legacy, believing he had the potential to become a hero as great as Hashirama. After leaving the Senju estate, M.N. made his way to UA. He had been admitted based on recommendations from his mother and the other 2 sannin, and he was already the top student among the recommended candidates. However, he still hoped to make friends, as his mother had encouraged. Upon arriving at UA, he searched for his classroom, Class 1A. To his surprise, when he entered, he found it empty. Remembering his mother's words about heroes being early, he felt frustrated, realizing he had been misled about being late. As he looked around, he noticed a yellow sleeping bag at the front of the classroom. When a disheveled man emerged from it, M.N. jumped back in shock. The man introduced himself as Shota Aizawa, the Class 1A teacher, and explained that he had been there all along. M.N. realized he had arrived much earlier than necessary, feeling a mix of embarrassment and annoyance. Aizawa pointed out that M.N. had not introduced himself, suggesting that he needed to work on his manners if he wished to build a heroic image. Feeling a wave of disappointment wash over him, M.N. took a moment to compose himself before introducing himself as M.N. Senju. Aizawa acknowledged his name, hinting at the significance it carried. That explains your early arrival. Your mother, Tsunade, has always had a reputation for being punctual. However, being a Senju doesn't grant you any special treatment. If anything, it gives me more reason to push you harder. Do you understand that? The response was a nod of agreement. After their conversation, Aizawa mentioned he had errands to run and instructed them to sit at a table and wait for class to start. They settled into a desk toward the back and quickly fell asleep. A few minutes before class began, they awoke to a flurry of activity. The classroom was now full, and Mr. Aizawa had not yet arrived. They took the opportunity to observe their classmates and their personalities. Just then, a green-haired boy entered, accompanied by a blue-haired boy with glasses. They approached and introduced themselves. A smile spread across their face as they responded, introducing themselves as Senju. The mention of the Senju name silenced the room, drawing everyone's attention and curiosity. Midoriya began to express his admiration for the Senju family, particularly for great-grandfather Hashirama. Mr. Aizawa entered the room, scolding the class for the noise. He explained that they would be taking a quirk apprehension test. He led them outside to explain the test, which was designed to gauge their mastery of quirks. It was similar to the physical exams most students had taken in middle school, but with the application of their quirks. He called on Boku to demonstrate. Boku approached, his intensity palpable as he prepared to throw a ball as far as he could using his quirk. The energy radiating from him was unmistakable, and they noted his apparent anger management issues, deciding to be cautious around him. After Boku's impressive throw of 705.3 meters, excitement buzzed through the class. Students expressed their enthusiasm for the test, but Mr. Aizawa reminded them of the seriousness of the examination, emphasizing that it was designed to assess their potential against real villains. He warned that anyone lacking potential would face expulsion, particularly those who placed last. The class responded in unison, acknowledging his words. With the first test underway, everyone completed their dash except for MN. When it was finally their turn, they lined up at the starting line and took off at the signal, using a lightning-style chakra cloak to enhance their speed. They finished in an impressive 1.57 seconds, earning the title of the fastest in the class. However, they felt that being the fastest was not enough. Great-grand-uncle Tobirama had been able to move at instantaneous speeds with his jutsu, and MN resolved to study and practice his flying Raijin jutsu to match that level of speed. As the test continued, MN noticed Midoriya lagging behind, seemingly struggling to use his quirk. Despite this, Midoriya exhibited a strong determination, embodying the spirit of a true hero. As Midoriya prepared for his ball throw, MN sensed a surge of energy building within him, reminiscent of All Might. However, the energy dissipated, and MN realized that Eraserhead must have been involved, as he began to scold Midoriya. When Midoriya threw the ball, the energy concentrated in his fingers, causing them to break. MN understood that his body couldn't handle the energy buildup, leading to his injuries. Still, the similarities between Midoriya and All Might intrigued them. Midoriya managed to throw the ball 705.3 meters, demonstrating improvement, but it still placed him in last. Suddenly, Boku lashed out at Midoriya, using his quirk in anger. Just before he could strike, MN intervened with a water prison jutsu, stopping Boku in his tracks. Eraserhead reprimanded Boku for his actions, making it clear that such behavior was unacceptable. Boku, still fuming, approached MN with hostility, warning them not to cross him again. After that encounter, it was MN's turn for the ball throw. They infused chakra into their arms for added strength and launched the ball, achieving a distance of 843 meters. As the final results appeared on the screen, MN saw their name at the top, while Midoriya remained in last place. Mr. Aizawa then revealed that he had only been joking about expelling anyone, which shocked the class. He clarified that it was a motivational tactic, easing their concerns. After the test, MN engaged in conversations with several classmates before finally heading home. On the second day of school at UA, MN felt more rested and arrived on time, unlike the previous day. As they approached the school, a voice called out from behind, repeating their name with urgency. "Wait up!" Midoriya called out, waving as he hurried to catch up. I paused, turning to greet him with a small smile. "Hello, Midoriya. How's your morning?" I asked. "It's going well, but I actually stopped you because I had to tell you something," he replied, his voice trembling slightly. "Oh, what's that?" I inquired. He took a deep breath, his eyes glistening with emotion. I didn't get a chance to tell you this yesterday since you left so quickly, but I wanted to thank you for protecting me from Kachin when he was about to unleash his explosions. He's been bothering me for a while, and I get scared when he gets angry. When you stood up for me, I felt so happy, relieved, and safe because no one had ever defended me before. His voice broke, and tears streamed down his face. I placed my hand on his shoulder, offering him a reassuring smile that could rival All Might's. Looking him in the eyes, I said, "You don't have to thank me. I did what was right. I saw someone in danger and couldn't just stand by. If you ever need help, just reach out to me." His tears flowed even more at my words. After calming him down, we walked to school together, surprisingly arriving on time. The morning classes, including present mixed English lesson, dragged on until lunch. I wasn't sure where to sit until Midoriya invited me to join his friends, and I gladly accepted. During lunch, I felt a growing connection with them, especially with Ida. I could relate to his struggles of living up to a family legacy of successful heroes. However, while he faced expectations from his family, I dealt with the pressure of being part of the Senju family, known for producing exceptional heroes since my great-grandfather. After lunch, the real excitement began. I was in Class 1A's room, feeling bored, when the door burst open, and All Might entered with his usual flair. "I am now entering the door, like a normal person," he announced. The classroom erupted with excitement. All Might explained that it was time for hero training, and we needed to put on our hero costumes before heading to the training area. My costume instructions were straightforward. I needed protective armor that allowed for agility and resembled my great-grandfather's design. I was pleased with how it turned out, even if it wasn't red. Once everyone arrived at the training area, All Might gathered us for the task ahead. "Listen up, students. This is your first hero training exercise, so give it everything you've got. We're playing a game called Heroes vs. Villains. You will be divided into teams of 2. One team will act as villains, and the other as heroes. The villains have hidden a bomb in a building, and it's the hero's job to find it. To win, a hero simply needs to touch the bomb. Villains win by preventing the heroes from touching it and restraining them. Do you all understand?" The class erupted with questions, quickly overwhelming All Might. "Now I will randomly choose your teams. However, due to an uneven number of students, one person will not have a partner. I will draw a name now, and that student will face me after everyone else. Now, let's see who this lucky person is," he said, drawing a name. Our lucky person is none other than MN Senju," All Might announced, looking directly at me. I met his gaze with a confident smirk. After a brief pause, all the matches concluded, and it was my turn to face All Might. I was eager to see how the symbol of peace would fare against a Senju. "Now, young Senju, I will be filling the role of villain for this exercise. As a future hero, you must be prepared for these situations. If you hope to win, don't hold back, but I will pull my punches," he declared. I looked him in the eyes, filled with determination. I would not underestimate him. He smiled and instructed me to take my position at the warehouse. My classmates watched intently, likely questioning my strategy against All Might. He had told me not to hold back, but I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Even if I used my with style, it might not change the outcome. It would be wise to showcase my strategic abilities alongside my jutsu without revealing everything just yet. Standing at the entry point of the warehouse, I prepared to execute my plan. "Shadow clone jutsu," I said, creating a shadow clone beside me. "Stay close, but behind me." Intention was to launch a direct approach against All Might, using a series of jutsu to distract him while my clone aimed for the bomb. My greatest advantage was that All Might was unaware of the variety of jutsu at my disposal. Like most people, he was likely unaware of individual jutsus like the Shadow Clone Jutsu. As he searched through the warehouse, he began to sense a presence and made his way toward it. He stumbled upon a room where a bomb was located and saw All Might. Phase 2 of his plan was set in motion. He whispered the words for the jutsu, Water Style, Hidden Mist Jutsu. As the mist filled the room, he noticed the confused expression on All Might's face. If this jutsu had confused him, victory was already within reach. He then unleashed, fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu. All Might barely dodged, but he was too slow as he was struck by the lightning-style chakra cloak. All Might retaliated with a series of punches, which he dodged and blocked until one landed, sending him flying backward. All Might taunted him, questioning why he was down after just one hit. He engaged in close-quarters combat again, but he knew he had to end this quickly. Wind style, Great Breach, he declared. The jutsu sent All Might crashing across the room, creating a small crater in the wall. Before All Might could recover, he quickly weaved the hand signs for his next jutsu. Lightning style, Thunderbolt Jutsu. The crater expanded, and All Might appeared to take damage, his costume showing signs of wear and charred marks from the lightning-style jutsu. The mist had dissipated completely. After a few moments, All Might rose, laughing heartily. He acknowledged that he had underestimated the young Senju, admitting that the fight was proving to be the most exciting he had experienced in a while. He warned that he would no longer hold back. The young Senju responded that All Might wouldn't need to pull his punches, as the match was already over. All Might laughed again, cautioning him not to be overconfident. He then gestured to his left. As All Might turned, the young Senju's shadow clone placed its hands on the bomb, concluding the battle. All Might was shocked, exclaiming in disbelief. The young Senju explained that he had positioned the clone before conjuring the mist, which was meant to distract All Might. While All Might was focused on him, the clone had waited for the right moment. He admitted to feeling a bit worried when All Might went on the offensive. They shared a moment of silence before All Might placed a hand on his shoulder, praising not only his strategic abilities but also his strength. Surprisingly, it was All Might who needed to visit Recovery Girl for treatment of his minor burns. The next day he woke up feeling tired, but eventually got out of bed and prepared for the day. Everything went smoothly that morning, and just as he was about to leave, his mother stopped him. She had something to give him: a sealing scroll containing a summoning, specifically an armor set that was an exact replica of what his great-grandfather wore. She thought it would be a nice gift since he aspired to be like him and reminded him to take it in case of emergencies. Grateful, he hugged her and took the scroll before heading to UA, where he was met by a throng of media. They surrounded him, bombarding him with questions about having All Might as a teacher, living up to his family's legacy, and favoritism at UA. He quickly answered their inquiries while making his way past them. Class proceeded as usual, and during homeroom, they elected class representatives. He voted for Ida, who seemed the most responsible and level-headed, though he didn't win. The most notable event of the day was a false alarm that Ida managed to stop single-handedly, leading Midoriya to suggest that he should be class rep instead. Mr. Aizawa announced a field trip to test their quirks in rescue situations, which sounded exciting. He sat in the middle of the bus, listening to conversations around him. One conversation caught his attention. Kirishima commented on Midoriya's quirk, noting its similarity to All Might's. Midoriya panicked at the mention of All Might, raising suspicions about the connection between his quirk and All Might's. Tsuyu pointed out that unlike Midoriya, All Might didn't get hurt after using his quirk. Kirishima continued, stating that to stand out as a hero, one needed a flashy quirk like Bakugo's, Todoroki's, and his own, which were the best in the class. He acknowledged Bakugo's anger issues and Todoroki's lack of enthusiasm but praised the young Senju for having both a great quirk and personality. He even mentioned how the young Senju had given All Might a tough time, prompting Tsuyu to ask a question she had been meaning to pose. Everyone's attention turned to him, including Mr. Aizawa's, as he anticipated the question. Tsuyu asked if he could access with style like his great-grandfather. He felt a rush of anxiety, knowing this question would come eventually but unsure of how to answer. Nervously, he replied that he could not. They surprisingly accepted the answer without further questioning. Upon entering the USJ, they were greeted by Pro Hero 13, who provided a rundown of the day's activities. The key takeaway was that if they couldn't fully control their quirks, they could endanger their surroundings. Suddenly, a portal appeared, and an unsettling feeling washed over them. A horde of villains emerged from the portal, led by an unhealthy-looking man, a gas-like figure, and a grotesque creature. Mr. Aizawa ordered everyone to escape while he confronted the villains, instructing them not to engage. Just then, the misty figure surrounded them and introduced himself. He claimed to be part of the League of Villains and expressed regret for crashing their sanctuary of justice. He mentioned that they had come to kill All Might but were informed of a change in his schedule. Regardless, he intended to separate the students from one another. In an instant, the surroundings transformed into a mountainous area, with some classmates present but surrounded by villains. Panic surged through them as they contemplated their next move. They had to fight, and there was no time to hesitate. 20 minutes later, exhaustion hung heavy in the air. Jiru remarked on the seemingly endless wave of villains, while Kaminari noted how they just kept getting back up. Everyone was losing hope, and that was unacceptable. Determined, the protagonist resolved to use their wit style to save their friends and thwart the villains' plans. They called for their classmates to gather around and instructed them to place their hands on them. Using medical ninjutsu, they healed their friends, who were surprised by the sudden surge of energy. Yaoyorozu was asked if she could create gas masks. Although confused, she complied, crafting masks for herself, Jiru, and Kaminari. Once they donned the masks, the protagonist summoned armor from a scroll and prepared for action. With a powerful declaration, they unleashed their wood-style technique, causing a vast forest to bloom where the villains stood. The villains fell unconscious from the overwhelming pollen, and the protagonist assured their classmates it was safe to remove their masks. The shock on their faces was evident as they processed what had just occurred. Kaminari questioned why the protagonist hadn't revealed this ability sooner. The protagonist explained that they had noticed their friends losing hope and felt it was their duty as a hero to preserve that hope. They declared their identity as M.N. Senju, the great-grandson of Hashirama Senju, ready to confront the organized villains threatening peace. With wood clones scattered across the battlefield to protect their classmates, the protagonists set off to face the monstrous creature. As they approached, they noticed Aizawa in a precarious position, with the creature looming over him. Midoriya, Tsuyu, and Mineta were hiding nearby, but something in Midoriya's eyes hinted at recklessness. Without hesitation, Midoriya leaped out, attempting to attack the sickly man. The creature moved to intercept him, but the protagonist swiftly intervened. They unleashed the wood dragon technique, wrapping the creature tightly and allowing Midoriya's attack to connect. Shock rippled through the area, even among the villains, as the protagonist restrained the creature. Midoriya, astonished, questioned why the protagonist had kept this ability a secret. The protagonist explained that they had been waiting for the right moment to reveal their power, especially with such a serious threat at hand. As Midoriya and the others carried Aizawa to safety, the sickly man grew furious, demanding to know who the protagonist was and how they could restrain the Nomo for so long. The protagonist introduced themselves again, asserting their commitment to stopping the villains' plans. The man, enraged, declared that the Nomu was created specifically to kill All Might and that the protagonist posed a significant threat to their plans. The protagonist dismissed the man as a delusional menace, determined to put an end to his schemes. The sickly man commanded the Nomu to attack. The creature broke free from the wood dragon's grip and charged at the protagonist with fierce intent. The protagonist quickly countered with the wood golem technique, which blocked the Nomu's punch. A fierce battle ensued as the two exchanged blows. The protagonist noted that the Nomu showed no signs of fatigue, suggesting it possessed a high durability quirk, making it a formidable opponent. But all of a sudden, a loud and booming voice echoed through the area, declaring that there was no need for fear because help had arrived. In that moment of distraction, a sharp pain pierced through the protagonist's stomach, and they looked down in horror to see that they had been struck by the creature's fingers. The force of the attack flung them across the area. They landed hard and began to cough, noticing the chaos of All Might battling the enemies. As they focused, they felt their bodies start to heal, regenerating the wound in their stomach. It was clear that observing the fight would provide valuable insights into the villain's strengths, and the protagonist planned to seize the right moment to intervene. There was a tense moment when All Might appeared to be on the verge of defeat, but then some classmates rushed in to defend him. All Might began to question the Nomu's quirk, and the villain revealed that it had an absorption ability. This revelation sparked a plan in the protagonist's mind, one that required entering Sage mode. They began to channel an enormous amount of chakra, drawing the attention of everyone around. With a powerful technique, they unleashed the Sage art, true several thousand hands jutsu. The Nomu charged at them but was immediately halted by the overwhelming force of 1,000 hands striking simultaneously. Once the jutsu was complete, the protagonist realized their plan had succeeded. The Nomu could not absorb the force of the relentless strikes and was ultimately defeated. The villain, Tamura Shigaraki, ordered a retreat, acknowledging that the protagonist posed a greater threat than he had anticipated, even more so than All Might. He vowed that the next encounter would end differently. As the villains vanished, authorities and pro-heroes arrived to apprehend the Nomu and arrest the henchmen. Outside, the protagonist became the center of attention, with classmates discussing how they had defeated the villains and utilized wood style. They requested that their ability to use wood style remain a secret for now and invited their classmates to call them by their first name if they wished. Afterward, they made their way to the hospital to assist those who had been seriously injured during the attack. The next day in class, everyone was buzzing about the events at the USJ facility. It was a significant incident that had shaken one of the most secure places in Japan. While reflecting on the chaos, the protagonist was interrupted by classmates eager to share the morning news. Ida mentioned the headlines that had emerged, highlighting the protagonist's heroic actions. The media was abuzz with questions about their strength and potential as a future hero. The protagonist felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention but acknowledged the excitement. Just then, Aizawa entered, appearing surprisingly unscathed, much to everyone's astonishment. He explained that thanks to the protagonist's remarkable healing abilities, he had recovered from his injuries. However, he warned that their battles were not over. The UA Sports Festival was approaching, where students would compete against each other in various activities, providing a chance to showcase their quirks and attract the attention of hero agencies. With that, he announced a week off for training. As students began forming training groups, the protagonist was approached by the Boku squad. Kirishima proposed that training together would be a great idea, but the protagonist politely declined, explaining their intention to focus on perfecting a forbidden jutsu that required privacy. Before they could leave, Bakugo confronted the protagonist, expressing his frustration and determination to not be underestimated. He vowed to crush anyone who thought they could take it easy after their recent victory. Later, at the Senju estate, the protagonist's mother noted their early return and inquired about their plans for the week off. The protagonist explained Aizawa's announcement and their intention to seek out Orochimaru, a scientist with extensive knowledge of jutsu, including forbidden techniques. Their mother reluctantly agreed, cautioning them to be careful not to become one of Orochimaru's experiments. At Orochimaru's lab, the protagonist knocked on the door and was greeted by the scientist's snake-like eyes. Orochimaru welcomed them inside and invited them to sit down, eager to hear the reason for their visit. "You certainly wouldn't be here just to see me. You must have some reason for being here, or perhaps you want something from me." The question about the reanimation jutsu was clear. It was asked whether it was possible to use that technique without an actual sacrifice. Orochimaru acknowledged the desire for knowledge, explaining that a sacrifice was indeed required in any circumstances, but there were other ways to work around that. The alternative involved creating an artificial body using the cells of a great ancestor, though Orochimaru admitted he didn't have many of those cells available. He then suggested that the protagonist's cells were nearly identical, which meant they could be used instead. All he needed was a sample of blood. The protagonist agreed, and Orochimaru expressed his satisfaction, curious about the reason behind the request for such a jutsu. The upcoming UA Sports Festival was mentioned, emphasizing the need to learn new techniques and hone skills by training with the best, even if those individuals had long since passed. With the necessary DNA samples confirmed, they prepared to begin the process. Shortly after the scientific preparations were complete, Orochimaru asked if the protagonist remembered the proper hand signs for the jutsu. With a nod of affirmation, the protagonist was ready to perform the jutsu, calling forth the reanimation. 2 coffins rose from the ground, opening to reveal 2 figures emerging. Hashirama's confusion was evident as he questioned his surroundings, while Tobirama pointed out that someone had summoned them back to the world of the living. Hashirama's intense gaze shifted to the protagonist, who confirmed their role as the caster of the jutsu. The realization of their connection as a great-grandson sparked excitement in Hashirama, who bombarded the protagonist with questions about family and the current state of the world. As Hashirama embraced the protagonist in a joyful hug, Tobirama intervened, urging his brother to focus. He inquired about the reason for their summoning, prompting the protagonist to explain the need for training in preparation for the sports festival and the challenges faced at the USJ. The two brothers agreed to assist in the training, with plans to refine wood-style techniques and learn new jutsu. The next day, the protagonist woke early, eager to begin training. After breakfast, they summoned the two Senju brothers once more. Hashirama welcomed the early start, reiterating the training plan. He asked about the protagonist's current abilities with wood style, leading to a demonstration of the wood golem jutsu. Hashirama's mastery was evident, and he pointed out the differences in size and technique, emphasizing the need for improved chakra control. Tobirama noted the excessive hand signs used, explaining that fewer signs would conserve chakra. They discussed the protagonist's sage mode duration, with Hashirama expressing confidence that with focused training, significant improvements could be made by the end of the week. As training commenced, Hashirama shared tips and stories, enriching the experience and deepening the bond between them. The protagonist felt a sense of purpose and determination, ready to embrace the challenges ahead. What brought me the most joy was that he wanted to learn about me and my character. We trained and talked all morning until the afternoon arrived, prompting me to switch to training with Tobirama. In the afternoon, as soon as I finished my session with Hashirama, Tobirama called me over to begin our training. He noted that as a Senju, my speed levels were likely very high, but he emphasized that there was always room for improvement. He introduced me to a technique he had mastered, the flying Raijin Jutsu, claiming it had once made him the fastest person alive. He asked if I was familiar with it. I acknowledged that it was an S-rank ninjutsu technique that allowed the user to teleport instantaneously by marking a location. Tobirama affirmed my understanding but explained that there was much more to the technique. It could be used not only for combat but also to teleport others marked by the user. He then proceeded to demonstrate. In the blink of an eye, he placed his hand on my shoulder and threw a kunai a distance away. Suddenly, I found myself standing right in front of the kunai. I looked back at him, surprised to see him wave from afar before he appeared right in front of me in an instant, causing me to jump back in shock. I expressed my frustration at not being warned about the demonstration. Tobirama explained that he wanted me to experience the true speed of the teleportation. He emphasized the importance of having keen awareness and quick reflexes while using the jutsu, especially in combat. If I couldn't process my surroundings quickly enough, I would be vulnerable to my opponent. However, mastering the technique would allow me to outmaneuver my enemies. He instructed me to create my own mark by infusing chakra, similar to his, and encouraged me to practice teleporting between my marks for the rest of the day. After 30 minutes, I successfully created a mark, albeit a different pattern than his. Tobirama approved of my mark and praised my progress, stating that I should master the jutsu by the time the sports festival arrived. Finally, the day of the sports festival had come, the moment I would showcase my true strength to the world. After all my training with the two Senju, my abilities had significantly improved. I had learned to control and conserve my chakra, refine my wood style, and master the flying Raijin Jutsu to the point where Tobirama believed I might one day surpass him in speed. As I waited for the festival to begin, my thoughts drifted back to my last day of training with the brothers. Tobirama had told me that I was becoming a strong and talented hero, comparable to him. He revealed that he believed I was skilled enough to create a new jutsu he had conceptualized but never had the chance to develop due to his untimely death. He described the flying Fujin Jutsu, a sister technique to the flying Raijin, which would allow me to fly at great speed by placing wind-infused markings around my body. He asked if I would accept the challenge of creating this jutsu, and I eagerly agreed, knowing it would make me a formidable opponent. My thoughts were interrupted by a commotion in the center of the room, drawing everyone's attention. Shoto Todoroki and Izuku Midoriya were at the center of it. Todoroki confidently stated that he believed he was stronger than Midoriya, to which Midoriya responded that he would defeat him, aided by All Might. It seemed Todoroki was declaring a challenge to Midoriya, which piqued my interest. I knew Midoriya was clever, and his intelligence often led him to victory. Perhaps I should mark him, just in case he devised a clever strategy. Yes, I decided I would place a mark on him. A loud voice boomed over the speakers, announcing the start of the sports festival and introducing Class 1A. As we entered the arena, the deafening cheers of the crowd welcomed us. I made my way to Midoriya to place my mark on him. As I approached, I called out to him. He acknowledged me, asking what was up. I smiled and told him to do his best, placing my hand on his shoulder to mark him without him realizing it. What followed was Bokugu stirring up trouble, causing everyone to feel frustrated with Class 1A. Our first competition was a race, and we were already lined up. Midnight shouted for us to begin, and everyone took off through the gates, many of my classmates and I leading the pack, despite Todoroki freezing our path, much to his dismay. As we sped down the path, colossal robots appeared to block our way, causing everyone to hesitate. Suddenly, one of the robots froze completely from Todoroki's quirk, allowing him to pass. If he could take them out so easily, then I could too. I unleashed my fire style, Fireball Jutsu, striking all the robots in my path and clearing the way. I decided to hold back a little and let some people ahead of me to draw attention away from myself. I was confident that Midoriya would do something extraordinary to secure first place, while Bokugu and Todoroki would likely be in the top 3 as well. While they were busy, I planned to teleport in and take first place for myself. It was a brilliant strategy. After some time, I noticed a massive explosion ahead. I smirked, knowing it had to be Midoriya. Present Mike announced that Midoriya was now speeding into the lead, while Todoroki and Bokugu fought for first place. Midoriya had managed to outmaneuver them and secured first place. This was unbelievable. I teleported to where Midoriya was and pushed him down, surprising everyone. Present Mike exclaimed that I had taken the lead by surprise, and now I was the first place winner. The crowd's roar intensified at my sudden appearance, especially since I had originally been close to last place. Present Mike commented on the surprises expected from someone of the prestigious Senju family. Shortly after, Midoriya crossed the finish line in second, followed by Todoroki and Boku. When Bokugu arrived, he raged at me, accusing me of holding back. I chose not to respond. I could feel Todoroki's gaze on me, sensing that he was beginning to view me as a rival or a threat to his goals. It seemed that it would be those 3 against me as their common rival. Present Mike announced that everyone was now present, and it was time to spin to see what our next activity would be. The cavalry battle was announced, and Midnight explained the rules. We would form teams with a rider and a horse to steal headbands from other teams, with the person in first place being worth the most points. Immediately, I felt everyone's gaze on me, not just Bokugu, Todoroki, and Midoriya. I was now everyone's target, which would make finding partners difficult. Since I anticipated trouble finding partners, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I performed the Shadow Clone Jutsu, creating 3 clones to lift me off the ground so I could be the rider. I asked Midnight if this was acceptable, and after a moment of thought, she allowed it. I instructed my clones to scatter flying Raijin markings throughout the field in case I needed them later. As time passed, it seemed everyone had formed solid teams, and the match was about to begin. I decided to make things challenging for everyone right from the start. Midnight called for everyone to take their positions, and the match began. I weaved the signs for the hidden mist jutsu, creating a thick mist that blinded everyone. Then I summoned an earth-style, stone golem jutsu, climbing atop the massive golem to make it difficult for anyone to reach me while they were blinded. Suddenly, I heard explosions approaching, realizing I had spoken too soon. Above the dissipating mist, I spotted Bokugu. He shouted that he wouldn't let me feel safe up there. I muttered under my breath, finding him an annoyance, and created an earth-style mud wall. Bokugu slammed into the mud wall I had acted, unable to react in time. He quickly retreated, abandoning his attempt to reach the top of my stone golem. For the rest of the round, I played defensively, waiting for the right moment to strike. Some attempted to take him down, but he effortlessly blasted them away with one of his jutsus or let them crash into a mud wall, just as he had done to Bakugo. The announcer declared that time was up and revealed the teams with the most points that would proceed to the next round. Team Senju, Team Todoroki, Team Bakugo, Team Midoriya, and Team Shinso. The next activity would be a one-on-one tournament, and participants were instructed to check the brackets to see their opponents. He scanned the brackets and realized he would be facing Denki Kaminari. This would be an easy match. Present Mike concluded the announcement by stating there would be an intermission PRD for spectators to eat and for tournament participants to rest and strategize. He made his way to the arena to prepare for his upcoming fight with Kaminari in one of the waiting rooms. After wandering through the complex corridors, he finally spotted a waiting room. Just as he was about to enter, something unusual caught his attention. Down the hallway, one of the walls began to crack rapidly, and suddenly, All Might burst through the wall, landing on the opposite side. He looked startled, clearly shaken by whatever had caused the commotion. The tension in the air heightened as he hesitated to approach, fearing what might follow. Then, a very angry-looking woman leaped through the smoke and drop-kicked All Might. He recognized her instantly. It was his mother, and she looked furious. Anyone who knew her understood the importance of not upsetting her. All Might began pleading for mercy as she held him by his collar, glaring at him with fierce intensity. At that moment, Jiraiya cautiously walked through the wall, attempting to intervene and prevent any further chaos. He spotted him and pointed him out to her. She released All Might and turned her attention toward him. He stuttered nervously, asking what she was doing there. She replied that she couldn't miss watching her son perform in the sports festival. He glanced back at All Might, who had already fled the scene. His mother continued, explaining that Jiraiya had something to give him. Jiraiya held out a small case and suggested they talk inside the waiting room. He mentioned that he had heard from Tsunade about his mastery of the flying Raijin Jutsu. He nodded in confirmation. Jiraiya opened the case, revealing a collection of unique kunai. He looked at Jiraiya with curiosity. Noticing his expression, Jiraiya explained the significance of the kunai. He recounted how he had trained a brilliant student who had mastered the jutsu, even surpassing Hashirama Senju. This student would mark the kunai with his seal, scattering them across the battlefield and using them as regular kunai, catching opponents off guard. He encouraged him to consider adopting this fighting style for his upcoming matches. Jiraiya decided to leave him to think it over, mentioning that the first match was about to start, and he would go to watch. As he prepared for his match against Kaminari, he decided to use the kunai Jiraiya had given him. They would provide him with an advantage, and he doubted Kaminari's reaction time would be quick enough to counter his strategy. With his plan in mind, he anticipated that the match would be over in less than a minute, likely shorter than Todoroki's swift victory over Zero. He jumped down to the arena and performed a great fireball jutsu, melting the remaining ice that Todoroki had created. Todoroki shot him a glance, seemingly annoyed. Thanks to his assistance, Midnight announced that the match between him and Denki Kaminari would begin shortly. A few moments later, Kaminari made his way to the opposite side of the field. Present Mike provided enthusiastic introductions for both of them. With no questions from either participant, the match was set to begin. He summoned one of the kunai into his hand, preparing to throw it. He called out to Kaminari, warning him not to take what was about to happen personally. Kaminari responded with confusion just as the kunai flew past him. In an instant, he teleported in front of Kaminari, caught the kunai, and tossed it out of bounds. He placed his hand on Kaminari's chest and teleported him to where the kunai had landed. The announcer declared that Kaminari was out of bounds, and he was the winner. Kaminari wore a bewildered expression, clearly struggling to comprehend what had just transpired in mere seconds. Now, he waited to watch the remaining first matches, eager to see who he would face in the second round. It appeared he would either fight Ida or Hatsum. He would have to wait and see what unfolded next. As the first match of the second round approached, he prepared himself for his upcoming battle against Ida. He contemplated whether to stay and watch the next match or leave to devise a new strategy for their fight. The only reason I won so quickly against Kaminari was that he wasn't the most perceptive. However, Ida was a different story. He had excellent reaction time. Yet, it seemed he struggled with unexpected changes or being overwhelmed, as demonstrated in his last match, which was more of an embarrassment than a victory. I decided to stick with my initial strategy against Kaminari and improvise if necessary. Under no circumstances would I use my wood style in this match. Whoever won would likely face me next, so it was essential to study their techniques closely. Todoroki, in particular, intrigued me because he had won in a manner similar to mine, keeping his full capabilities hidden. This match promised to be both interesting and entertaining. After the match concluded, it was clear that Todoroki had expanded his abilities beyond just ice. His fire was impressive and powerful, but I couldn't let that distract me. First, I had to defeat Ida. As I made my way to the arena, Ida was already waiting on the opposite side. Midnight announced the start of the match, and as she called for it to begin, I quickly threw a kunai at him, just as I had done with Kaminari. As I teleported in front of him, he dashed away, but I still threw the kunai out of bounds, just in case. Ida recognized my technique, acknowledging it as the second Hokage's. I then weaved the hand signs for Water Dragon Jutsu and launched it at him, but he barely managed to dodge it. Suddenly, Ida went on the offensive with his Recipro Burst, forcing me to defend myself. As he focused on attacking, I noticed he was so concentrated that he might be caught off guard by something unexpected. I quickly threw a kunai behind him, and when he didn't see it, I teleported behind him and executed a flying Raijin level 2 attack. He crashed to the ground, and I marked him before teleporting him to the kunai that was out of bounds, just in case my Rasengan hadn't knocked him out. Midnight announced that Ida was out of bounds, and I advanced to the next round. It seemed I would face Todoroki after all, which would be very interesting. After my match with Ida, I made my way through the stadium to rejoin my classmates. Turning a corner, I encountered the number 2 hero, Endeavor. He recognized me and expressed his admiration for my skills, noting that I represented the Senju family well. He acknowledged my use of the second Hokage's teleportation technique, which he found impressive. I sensed he had another reason for speaking to me. He mentioned that Senju members often had hidden strengths and implied that I was concealing my true power, much like his son did with his left side. He urged me to give Todoroki my all in our upcoming match, hoping it would push him to use his fire, as he had in his last round. As Endeavor walked away, I called out to him. I acknowledged his expectations but assured him that I intended to reveal my secret power in this round, regardless of who I faced. If Todoroki refused to use his fire, I was confident he wouldn't last long. I continued to my classmates to watch the next matches and see who I might face in the final round. My conversation with Endeavor had taken some time, and I realized the next match had already begun, with Tokoyami winning quickly. As I awaited the fight between Kirishima and Bakugo, my thoughts drifted back to my conversation with Endeavor. I felt uneasy about the idea of forcing Todoroki to use his left side, even though Endeavor's expectations were high. I knew I would give my all, not because he asked, but to demonstrate my true capabilities and the legacy of Hashirama Senju. Entering the arena, I saw Todoroki on the opposite side. Present Mike began his enthusiastic introductions as we prepared for the match. Midnight announced that the match would start, and I called out to Todoroki, warning him that if he didn't use his fire, he wouldn't last a minute. With a singular hand sign, I prepared my jutsu. Wood style, deep forest bloom. An expansive forest erupted across the battlefield, and the crowd roared with excitement. Flowers bloomed, scattering pollen throughout the arena. I noticed Todoroki becoming drowsy from the pollen, and I wondered if he would truly refrain from using his fire. Just as my doubts began to grow, Todoroki's flames ignited, and he blasted the nearest flowers. As he manipulated the wood, it began to attack and overwhelm his opponent. At least he was putting up a fight. Suddenly, the wood froze over, and his opponent shattered it effortlessly. Then he unleashed a massive blast of fire and charged forward, likely aiming for close combat. With a swift motion, he called upon the earth style, mud wall technique. As the wall sank back into the ground, he noticed that Todoroki had collapsed during his charge, likely overwhelmed by the pollen in the air. The announcer declared that Todoroki had fallen unconscious, and Senju was the winner. In the arena waiting room, only a few minutes had passed since the fight, and anxiety began to consume him. It wasn't fear of Bokugu that troubled him, but the overwhelming reactions to his wood style. The media was buzzing with headlines about him, and he felt the weight of their scrutiny. He found himself shaking and hyperventilating as negative thoughts flooded his mind. Would villains start targeting him? Had he made a mistake by revealing his powers at such a young age? Would people see him differently now? In a fit of panic and frustration, he hurled chairs and a table across the room with one of his jutsu, collapsing against the wall, pulling his legs to his chest, and letting out a scream. The room was a mess, and so was he. He sat there silently sobbing until someone opened the door and looked into his eyes. It was All Might. In All Might's gaze, he saw a young boy, frightened and overwhelmed by years of societal pressure, and his heart ached for him. He spoke softly, admitting his doubts about being number one under such scrutiny. All Might crouched down, taking in his condition and the chaos around them. He shared that he too had fears and secrets, revealing his frail form. He explained how he remained a hero despite the risks he faced. All Might reassured him that being a hero wasn't about public perception, it was about making sacrifices to help others. He reminded him of his bravery during the fight with the Nomu, emphasizing that true heroism comes from acting selflessly. He encouraged him to embrace his powers for good and assured him that he had what it took to be a hero, regardless of the odds. As their conversation concluded, All Might suggested he clean himself up and prepare for his next match, urging him to reflect on their talk. In the arena battlefield, he pondered All Might's words. If he wanted to be truly heroic, he needed to focus less on others' opinions. The announcer's voice echoed, signaling the start of the match. Across the field, Bokugu glared fiercely and shouted a challenge, unleashing a massive explosion right from the start. He quickly formed hand signs for a jutsu he believed would counter the blast. The strong wind dissipated the explosive energy, and he threw a marked kunai out of bounds, just in case. With determination he called out, "Wood style, deep forest emergence." As the wood surged forward, Bokugu swiftly countered, destroying the incoming attacks. Realizing this tactic wasn't working, he shifted strategies. "Wood clone jutsu, wood golem jutsu," he declared. The golem emerged from beneath him, and he launched an assault with both the golem and his clones. Bokugu handled the onslaught well, but as the golem swung to strike, Bokugu leaped onto its arm, aiming for him. Caught off guard, he was blown off the ground, landing seemingly defeated. Driven by ego, Bokugu grabbed him by the throat, lightly choking him as he proclaimed victory. A small smile crept onto his face, not from enjoyment of the situation but from recalling Tobirama's training advice about the flying Raijin technique. Bokugu's grip would be his downfall, as it provided the direct contact needed for the teleportation. In an instant, Bokugu found himself teleported out of bounds, and he quickly regained his footing as the announcer declared his victory. Bokugu erupted in rage, requiring Midnight's quirk to subdue him. They had both underestimated each other, but perhaps he had overestimated Bokugu, who had made a critical mistake. Still, he wished he had won in a more graceful manner. At the awards ceremony, All Might made a grand entrance and delivered an inspiring speech while distributing the awards. Third place went to both Tokoyami and Todoroki, and the second-place medal was awarded to a still-fuming Bokugu, who had been raging ever since discovering the reason for his loss. "You see, the mistake I made was telling Kirishima how I won the fight and how my technique worked. He found it amusing and went ahead and shared it with Bokugu. Afterward, All Might presented me with my first-place prize, and everyone wrapped up for the day. The day after the sports festival concluded, we had our usual class. Homeroom was lively as always, with us being loud and Mr. Aizawa urging us to quiet down. This time, the excitement stemmed from the fame and recognition many of us were receiving from people in the streets. Eventually, Aizawa had enough of the noise. His quick activated, eyes glowing red and hair standing on end, as he announced that he had a few important announcements to make to start class. He explained that there would be a draft for students to choose which hero agencies they would like to intern for. Certain hero agencies had specifically offered internship spots to select individuals, and I happened to be among those with the most offers. Even though some of you weren't specifically requested, you will all be interning at an agency this week. My next announcement is that today we will be discussing hero informatics, he continued. Some classmates began to murmur, worried it might be a surprise test, but that was not the case. Aizawa clarified that hero informatics referred to code names. Today, we would be choosing our hero names. He advised us to choose wisely, as these names should reflect the kind of hero we aspire to be. Midnight would be the one to approve the names, while Aizawa planned to take a nap. One by one, my classmates pitched ideas for their hero names, some being denied while others were accepted. The names ranged from childish and loud, like King Explosion Murder, to more fitting and straightforward names like Tailman, and some were intriguingly mysterious, like Tsukuyami. There was certainly a wide variety of unique names. As for my own hero name, I hadn't thought about it deeply. Should I choose a name that highlighted my abilities, or should I go for something discreet and mysterious? Perhaps I wanted a name that honored my family. There were so many factors to consider. My thoughts were interrupted by Midnight, who pointed out that I was one of the last students without a hero name. She asked if I had decided on something. I admitted that I hadn't, as I needed more time to think. She assured me that it was fine but encouraged me to choose one as soon as possible. Classes continued as usual, and by the end of the day, we received our lists of hero agencies for internships. I took a quick look at mine: Endeavor Hero Agency, Best Jeanist Hero Agency, Night Eye Hero Agency, and Hawks Hero Agency. Many prominent names were interested. I planned to examine this further at home. At the Senju estate, I texted my mom to let her know I was home. I received a quick response instructing me to go to the main living room, which felt a bit unusual. When I arrived, I found both my mom and Jiraiya waiting for me. Jiraiya greeted me with a smile, congratulating me on my sports festival victory and noting how outstanding I had been. He then explained that we had something important to discuss. My mom continued, mentioning that they had heard about the internships at hero agencies. She and Jiraiya believed they had found the perfect opportunity for me. She handed me a card, explaining that while it wasn't exactly an agency, learning from the person on the card would be highly beneficial. Even though it wasn't a traditional agency, it still qualified as an internship, and he had agreed to meet with me if I was interested. I examined the card, which had little information, just a picture of an elderly man, his name, address, and number. The name sounded familiar: Sarutobi. I recalled that he had been the #1 hero before All Might, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the same individual who had inherited the hero name Hokage. I asked if he was indeed the same person. Jiraiya confirmed that he was the man who had taught both him and my mom, as well as Orochimaru. He had learned directly from the legendary heroes Hashirama and Hashirama Senju. He was once the #1 hero and had played a significant role in establishing many hero agencies and schools, including UA. He was known as the third Hokage. I began to contemplate this opportunity. This man had learned from two of the greatest heroes in history, and they had trusted him enough to pass on their hero name. He had trained many talented heroes, including my mom and Jiraiya. His wisdom and experience were likely immense. Jiraiya then asked if I was interested in learning from him. I nodded eagerly, realizing that I didn't care about the other offers I had received. This was a rare opportunity. Jiraiya assured me that he would take me to see him the next day and instructed me to be ready when he picked me up. When the character got out of bed, they followed their usual routine, using the bathroom, eating breakfast, brushing their teeth, changing into clothes, and finally brushing their hair. The only difference today was that they needed to pack a bag with clothes, materials, and various necessities for their stay at the third Hokage's home. After completing their tasks, they waited for a while until receiving a text from Jiraiya, informing them that he was parked outside and ready to go. The character considered waking their mother to say goodbye but quickly decided against it, shivering at the thought of her being upset about being disturbed during her beauty sleep. They headed out to Jiraiya's car, placed their bag in the trunk, and climbed into the passenger seat. Jiraiya greeted them, asking if they were ready to leave. The character nodded in response. Jiraiya informed them that the drive would take about 2 to 3 hours since the Hokage lived at the base of Mt. Fuji, and mentioned they would need to make a quick stop along the way. The character looked puzzled, wondering what the stop would entail. Jiraiya, with a mischievous grin, explained that he had found a good place for some research. The character agreed, though they had forgotten what kind of research it was, or they might not have. During the drive, they listened to music while Jiraiya discussed what makes a good hero and how the character had been progressing in terms of strength. Eventually, they arrived at a town at the base of Mt. Fuji, and Jiraiya announced that this was the location of their quick stop before heading to the Hokage's house. He parked at a hot springs site and explained that he needed to conduct his research there. He offered the character the option to soak in the hot spring while he worked. The character went to the men's changing room, changed into a towel, and entered the hot spring, which was empty at the moment. They began to relax in the warm water. After some time, the character decided to check on Jiraiya. Wrapped in the towel, they approached him and noticed he was looking through binoculars at a group of women. It dawned on them that he was likely gathering material for his adult novels again. The character called out to him, perhaps a bit too loudly, which drew the attention of the women, who exclaimed in surprise. The character and Jiraiya quickly fled the scene, and the character managed to get dressed before they were discovered. They drove off, both feeling embarrassed. The car ride to the third Hokage's home was mostly silent, with Jiraiya too embarrassed to speak, and the character reflecting on how they should have anticipated Jiraiya's antics. They resolved to keep the incident to themselves, fearing their mother's reaction if she found out they had been involved in Jiraiya's mischief. Upon arriving at the Hokage's house, which was a large 2-story building with traditional Japanese architecture, they exited the car and retrieved their bag from Jiraiya's trunk. Jiraiya knocked on the front door, and soon it opened to reveal the Hokage, dressed in traditional robes and hat. Jiraiya greeted the Hokage warmly, and the Hokage acknowledged him, noting that he hadn't changed much. He then recognized the character as Tsunade's child and invited both of them inside. They were led to a spacious living room filled with sofas, confirming the character's suspicion that the house was larger on the inside. As they settled in, the Hokage engaged in small talk, asking the character basic questions while reminiscing with Jiraiya about their past adventures, including Jiraiya's notorious reputation. When the Hokage learned about Jiraiya's research, he scolded him for his behavior, which had earned him the nickname Pervy Sage. After about 45 minutes of conversation, the Hokage told Jiraiya it was time for him to leave so he could get to know the character better and discuss training. With Jiraiya gone, the Hokage turned to the character, expressing interest in their progress and the jutsu they had mastered. The character shared their knowledge of various jutsu, including wood style and flying Raijin, as well as their accomplishments, such as defeating formidable opponents. The Hokage took a moment to consider the character's words, stroking his beard thoughtfully. He decided that while the character had made significant progress, it was important to ensure they didn't become overly reliant on any single jutsu. He planned to teach them a variety of techniques suited to different situations and mentioned that they would learn new jutsu during their stay. However, he clarified that today would not be a training day. Instead, they would spend time getting to know each other better over a game of chess. Chapter End. Waking up early for today's training exercise filled me with excitement. I quickly donned my hero costume, a replica of Hashirama's armor, in case the session turned intense. As I stepped outside into the courtyard, I noticed Sarutobi-sensei already waiting, still dressed in his Hokage robes. Approaching him, he greeted me with a smile, expressing his delight at my arrival. He then posed a simple question: would I prefer to do the fun activities now or later? Eagerly, I chose the fun stuff now. With a smirk and a chuckle, he agreed, stating that we would focus on taijutsu first. He stripped off his robes to reveal his old hero outfit and lunged at me, unleashing a flurry of punches and kicks. I found myself on the defensive, trying to evade his strikes. He challenged me, questioning whether I was truly fighting or merely underestimating him as a weak old man. One of his punches landed on my cheek, causing me to stumble back. Before I knew it, I was knocked off my feet, landing on the ground. Sarutobi-sensei then pulled out a bell, dangling it in front of me and announcing that I would have an hour to try and take it from him. An hour later, I was exhausted. I had only managed to graze the bell twice, spending most of the time on defense. Sarutobi-sensei then informed me that we would repeat the exercise, this time allowing ninjutsu. He began with fire style, fireball jutsu, which I countered with water dragon jutsu, creating a cloud of steam between us. I then used wood style, deep forest emergence, summoning a forest to attack him from all sides. He skillfully cut through the wood with a pole he summoned, which then extended toward my face. Reacting quickly, I used the substitution jutsu to evade. Jumping up, I wove hand signs and launched wind style, great breach. Just as it was about to hit him, he countered with fire dragon bullet jutsu, engulfing my attack and causing me to feel the heat. An hour later, just like the previous exercise, I faced defeat. Among everyone I had ever fought, he was undoubtedly the strongest and most challenging. Afterward, I was told to rest and recharge my chakra, as we would continue these exercises until sunset. By 8 p.m., we had repeated the 2 exercises multiple times. Each time, I analyzed his fighting style, attempting to counter it, but he was simply too skilled. Still, I felt a sense of accomplishment for managing to touch the bell twice. As sunset arrived, Sarutobi-sensei brought me inside for a lecture on battle strategy, discussing how to counter various scenarios and choose the right jutsu for each situation. He emphasized the importance of the will of fire and how it related to the modern hero code. After the lecture, he began preparing dinner for us. I decided to check my phone for notifications, having not looked at it all day. Unlocking my phone, I saw a message from Midoriya sent about 15 minutes ago. It was a shared location with the rest of Class 1A, which raised my concern. It seemed suspicious, and I feared he might be in danger. I quickly searched for news on Hosu City, confirming my fears. The city was under attack. Without hesitation, I rushed to my room, changed into my hero costume, and explained the situation to Sarutobi-sensei. He understood and urged me to return before dinner got cold. I placed a marking within the house and teleported to the mark I had left on Midoriya during the sports festival. To be continued. Chapter End. Upon teleporting to the mark I had left on Midoriya, I found myself suspended in the air. Instinctively, I grabbed onto the closest thing, which turned out to be Midoriya's leg. His startled reaction was immediate, and he looked down, confusion and fear etched on his face. Quickly assessing the situation, I noticed more of the Nomu creatures from before, and it appeared they had captured Midoriya. I couldn't let that last for long. I threw a special kunai down to the group of heroes below and teleported Midoriya to safety. Then, I leaped onto the back of one of the flying Nomus and struck decisively. As the Nomu fell, I teleported back to the kunai I had thrown. I smirked at Midoriya, reminding him how fortunate he was that I had marked him during the festival. Suddenly, Endeavor appeared on the scene, urging everyone not to stand around foolishly, pointing out the presence of the hero killer. Panic spread among the heroes, with cries of confusion and fear echoing around us. An overwhelming aura of murderous intent radiated from the hero killer as he spoke, paralyzing everyone but me with fear. He condemned the heroes, claiming they were unworthy of the title and declaring that only All Might deserved it. As he approached, I gathered my chakra, creating an aura that matched his, halting him in his tracks. I lifted my finger, signaling my readiness to confront him. I had heard enough of his nonsense. I warned him to take one more step, or I would take him down myself. When he stepped forward, I acted as promised. I concentrated water-style chakra and shot it at him, piercing his lung. His negative aura dissipated as he dramatically fell to the ground, unconscious. Everyone began to calm down and regain their composure. The protagonist used wood style to imprison and completely restrain the villain. Feeling uneasy, they decided to investigate the area, sensing that something was off. As they prepared to leave, Endeavor stopped them, suggesting that they should stay until the police arrived to question everyone present. He believed that their presence would help everyone feel safer in case the villain made any sudden moves. The protagonist acknowledged Endeavor's point but expressed a desire to investigate the area, creating wood clones to assist. The wood clone moved in a different direction, leaving the original behind. As it jumped from building to building, it detected a familiar life signature. It soon realized that Tamura Shigaraki, the villain from the USJ incident, was nearby. The clone quickly made its way to Shigaraki's location and jumped in front of him, catching him and his companion, Kurogyari, off guard. Shigaraki, filled with anger, shouted that the protagonist always interfered with his plans, recalling how they had defeated his strongest Nomu. He contemplated having the protagonist eliminated before All Might could intervene. To provoke him further, the clone smirked and mentioned the hero killer as a friend of Shigaraki's. Shigaraki vehemently denied this, claiming that both the protagonist and the hero killer had ruined his day. Kurogyari then urged Shigaraki to calm down, reminding him of their ongoing plans. Curious, the protagonist asked about their plans. Shigaraki cryptically mentioned that they could expect significant developments from the League of Villains in the near future before abruptly leaving, causing the clone to disintegrate upon contact. Back in the original body, the protagonist received a surge of information from one of the clones, revealing the League of Villains' involvement in the recent events. They knew they needed to share this information with the police. After reporting to the authorities, the protagonist teleported back to the Sarutobi residence. The week passed quickly as training continued, refining their skills and judgment. They even began to successfully snatch the bell from Sarutobi-sensei. Additionally, they worked on the flying Fujin Jutsu, which allowed them to infuse wind chakra into their markings and achieve limited flight, though it still required improvement. As the week came to an end, the protagonist returned to school after a week away. Upon entering their homeroom, they noticed everyone discussing Todoroki, Ida, and Deku's encounter with the hero killer. Kirishima expressed relief that they were safe, while Yaoyorozu shared her worries. Sato remarked on how fortunate they were that Endeavor had arrived in time to save them. The protagonist interjected with a hint of sass, reminding them to appreciate their savior. The truth about the events remained hidden from the public, with the media providing a fabricated account. Only those present knew of the protagonist's involvement, but they understood the reasoning behind the secrecy. Kaminari then mentioned a video of the hero killer circulating online, suggesting that he was somewhat cool. Ida countered with a critique of Stain's ideology, launching into a class representative style speech. During hero training, All Might announced that they would be participating in rescue training in the form of a race. He explained the rules, stating that the first group would navigate an industrial maze to find him in the center. The first group consisted of Shiro, Ida, Ashido, Ojiro, and Midoriya. As the race began, Shiro took an early lead, but Midoriya surprised everyone by catching up and mimicking Bakugo's movements. However, Midoriya's lead ended when he slipped on a pipe, resulting in Shiro's victory. All Might congratulated the participants on their improvements since the beginning of the year and announced the second group, which included the protagonist, Kirishima, Jiraiya, Yaoyorozu, and Sato. The protagonist took their position, ready for the race. When the signal was given, the protagonist activated the flying Fujin, levitating into the air. Spotting All Might, they flew straight toward him, aiming for first place. Despite the flight being somewhat slow, it was enough to secure victory over their opponents. The possibility of infusing both lightning and wind chakra to enhance speed crossed my mind, and I decided it was something to explore in the future. As I returned to my classmates, I was greeted by a flurry of exclamations about my newfound ability to fly. Everyone seemed surprised and excited about it. All Might announced new teams throughout the day, keeping the atmosphere lively. The next day, Aizawa made a significant announcement regarding the upcoming final exams. He emphasized the importance of studying hard, as there would be both a written and a practical exam involving our quirks. He warned that failing these exams would mean missing out on summer camp and instead attending traditional summer schooling. Once he left the room, some students began to panic, particularly Mina and Kaminari, who had the lowest midterm grades. Yaoyorozu stepped in to offer her help, suggesting she could assist them in getting back on track. Kaminari expressed his gratitude, excited about the prospect of tutoring. Other students soon joined in, asking if they could be tutored as well. Yaoyorozu was thrilled by the response and invited everyone to her home over the weekend, where her mother would prepare the great hall for their study sessions. I approached the group and suggested that while studying was important, they should also consider some training. I proposed that we study at Yayarosa's place on Friday after school and then head to the Senju estate for training on Saturday. Everyone seemed enthusiastic about the plan. Later that day, I was added to a group chat with Yayarozu, Jiru, Mina, Siro, Kaminari, and Ojiro to finalize our weekend plans. We decided to meet at Yayarozu's home about an hour and a half after school, allowing time to pack overnight bags. We would study hard until bedtime and then train the following day. On Friday after school, I headed straight home to grab my bag, which I had packed earlier. I changed out of my uniform into a pair of jeans, a gray shirt, and a bomber jacket, completing the look with Vans and fingerless leather gloves. I chose to drive my Audi and put on my tinted aviators as I set off. 20 minutes later, I arrived at Yayarosa's main gate. Her home was quite a distance away, but I had managed to get there quickly. As I was about to enter, I noticed my friends in the rearview mirror, their expressions a mix of awe and surprise. I backed up slightly and rolled down my window, greeting them with a hint of sass. Kaminari complained about my show of wealth, and Jiru added that the weekend would likely be filled with displays of affluence. I invited them to hop in, but warned that one of them would have to walk since my car couldn't fit everyone. Siro mischievously suggested stuffing Kaminari in the trunk, and before he could protest, they tackled him and secured him with tape. Once everyone was settled, I drove up to Yayarozu's speaker, and she let us through. The rest of the day was spent with Yayarozu and me teaching and clarifying various topics. We eventually fell asleep, exhausted from our efforts. The next morning, we enjoyed breakfast before I drove the boys to my home while Yayarozu drove the girls. They were equally impressed by the size and decor of the Senju estate. I took them to the training area, where I coached them on improving their skills. The Senju estate had training bots similar to those used in their entrance exams, providing excellent practice, especially since we had heard that the practical exam would involve fighting bots. As the hours passed, I noted their improvements and addressed any weaknesses. By 5 p.m., we decided to call it a day and opted for pizza for dinner. After eating, we played games and had a great time until we all fell asleep from exhaustion. On Sunday morning, Yayarozu and I delivered one final lecture on strategy before having them apply their knowledge in training. This time, they sparred against each other, showcasing their progress. By 2 p.m., we concluded our successful training session. I drove the boys back home, while Yayarozu took the girls. Thus, our 3-day study session came to an end. As the test neared its conclusion, I felt confident that I had answered most questions correctly, so I settled in for the final moments, waiting for the time to run out. The study session's effectiveness from my peers lingered in my mind. Beep beep beep. Aizawa announced that time was up, instructing everyone to put down their pencils and close their test booklets. He asked them to pass their materials to the person on their right, with the far-right student bringing everything to him. He reminded everyone that the practical exam would take place after lunch and urged them to be prepared. Almost immediately, Mina and Kaminari rushed over to express their gratitude for the help we had provided. Kaminari mentioned that the only downside of the study session was the incident that occurred when we arrived at my house. In a flashback, after parking in the garage, we exited the car alongside the girls from the other vehicle. I led the way to the front door, having texted my mom to open it for us. She greeted us without her usual coat, revealing more of her physique than usual. She welcomed us warmly, inviting us inside and giving a brief tour of the rooms. Just then, Kaminari nudged me and whispered something inappropriate about my mom. I caught a glimpse of her expression from the corner of my eye, noticing a vain twitch in her forehead. She had overheard him. Before he could finish his thought, my mom grabbed him by the shirt and lifted him off the ground. In a low, intimidating tone, she asked what he had been about to say. I quickly intervened, trying to defuse the situation. I stammered that he was actually commenting on the large bouquets of flowers we had, glancing around in a panic until I spotted them. My mom's mood shifted dramatically as she released Kaminari, expressing delight that he liked the flowers. Kaminari, reflecting on the encounter, thought about how Mineta had described girls as demons inside. He couldn't believe I dealt with that daily. The flashback ended, and I playfully punched Kaminari, calling him a fool for his careless comment. I reminded him that my mom could have been much harsher and that I had saved his life with my quick thinking. Kaminari questioned whether my mom was really that intimidating. I explained that she was indeed formidable, recalling a story about a legendary figure who had faced severe consequences for a similar comment about her. We decided to head to lunch together. During lunch, I chose to sit with the DK squad. Normally, I roamed between different groups, but with the practical exam approaching, I figured they would discuss strategies, which they did. Aizawa gathered all of Class 1A in front of a building, where many of UA's staff members were present. Curiosity arose among the students about their presence. Aizawa's scarf fluttered as Principal Nizu appeared, explaining that they were there for the final exam. Due to the increase in villain activity, they believed it was more practical for us to engage in combat training against the pros. Aizawa outlined the match format. Teams of 2 students would face off against one of the pros, selected based on quirk compatibility and interpersonal dynamics. He also mentioned that they would wear limiters to give us an advantage. As he listed the matches, he noted that one match would be unique, one student against one opponent, with the identity of the opponent kept secret for now. When he reached the final match, a large blue figure leaped through the air, landing with a thud that cracked the ground. The students were taken aback at the prospect of fighting All Might. Just then, a black car pulled up, and All Might greeted the driver with enthusiasm, revealing the identity of the Hokage. I glanced at Midoriya, who wore his typical fanboy expression, while Bakugo questioned the Hokage's presence. Ida quickly corrected him, emphasizing the Hokage's importance in the hero community, and soon everyone joined in to scold Bakugo for his lack of respect. The Hokage found the situation amusing and expressed his anticipation for my match against him. After a brief pause, the match between Aizawa, Todoroki, and Yaoyorozu concluded. They had successfully managed to restrain Aizawa in a creative manner, showcasing their skills and teamwork. With the exception of the first match, everyone had demonstrated remarkable talent and collaboration. The first match was a tough one for Kirishima and Sato. Cementos truly was a challenging opponent for them. He seemed unbeatable in their eyes, so it was hard to blame them for their loss. Against anyone else, the outcome might have been different, but that was in the past. Now it was time for my own battle. As I stepped into the designated area, I noticed Sartobi-sensei already there in his black hero outfit, while I wore my red armor, a replica of Hashirama's. He looked at me with a serious expression and said he hoped I was prepared. Unlike my peers' opponents, he wouldn't be using a limiter. He wanted to see how much I had improved under his training. With that, he initiated his attack using with style, Deep Forest Emergence. Large wooden tendrils erupted from the ground, aiming to strike him. He summoned his pole and began cutting them down, expressing his frustration at my lack of creativity since he had used this tactic during our training. I smirked and teleported to him, catching him off guard and landing a few solid hits. He acknowledged my cleverness, realizing I had marked one of the tendrils. I backed off and summoned a katana, slashing at him as he blocked my strikes with his pole. Then, with a determined look, he pointed his pole at me, which suddenly extended and pushed me against the wall. Cornered, I threw a special marked kunai into the air and teleported to it. I unleashed fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu, which he countered with water style. While he was distracted, I threw the kunai by his feet and created a single wood clone, which he didn't notice. As steam rose from the clash of fire and water, I formed a Rasengan and sent it to my clone, who teleported to him. The Rasengan made contact, pushing him back, but he quickly transformed into a pile of concrete. A substitution technique. He swung his pole at my clone, which blocked the attack with its arm bracer. This was my chance. He didn't realize that the clone wasn't me. I threw a kunai toward his back, teleported, and struck him with a Rasengan. Then I used Genjutsu, Infinite Darkness Jutsu. As he fell, I cuffed him and released the Genjutsu, having beaten him fair and square. He got back up, smiling, and congratulated me on passing my practical exam. He remarked on my cleverness, talent, and strength as a hero. I expressed my gratitude, feeling honored. He then pointed out that I hadn't chosen a hero name yet. I nodded in response. He declared that starting tomorrow, I would be the 4th Hokage. Those words left me speechless. The title of Hokage was one of the most respected in our society, held by legendary heroes known for their strength, leadership, and wisdom. I couldn't believe he was serious about me taking on such a monumental title. Sarutobi-sensei laughed, and I felt a bit discouraged, but he reassured me that he believed I was capable of living up to the expectations of the title. He shared his experiences as Hokage, explaining that times were changing and he was too old to keep up. He emphasized the need for a younger, stronger Hokage to lead against the League of Villains, and he believed I was that person. As he finished speaking, a spark ignited within me, filled with confidence and determination. I knew my answer. I accepted the position. He smiled proudly, summoning the Hokage hat and handing it to me. I placed it on my head, and he looked me over, noting how much I resembled my great-grandfather. He placed a hand on my shoulder, expressing his belief that I would do great things as Hokage. He offered his guidance as I prepared for my new responsibilities. With a dramatic teleportation jutsu, he vanished, leaving me alone in the battlefield area with the hat on my head. I decided to head to the viewing room to watch the rest of my classmates' matches and share my new hero name. Soon, I stood in front of the door to the viewing room. I opened it and saw a few classmates inside, all focused on Uraraka, who had just entered. Midoriya noticed me and waved as I approached, praising my performance against Sarutobi-sensei and saying I had handled myself like a true professional. Yaoyorozu expressed her curiosity about the hat, noting that it belonged to the Hokage, which surprised her that Midoriya didn't recognize it. The protagonist decided to share the story behind the hat, performing a little dance reminiscent of the Toad Sage's routine, and began to boast about his accomplishments. He introduced himself as M.N. Senju, the great-grandchild of the first Hokage, the child of a legendary Sannin, the victor of the sports festival, and now the fourth Hokage. Everyone gasped at this revelation, and Midoriya, filled with excitement, exclaimed his disbelief. The protagonist, adopting a serious tone, reminded Midoriya to address him as Lord Fourth. Midoriya, taken aback, apologized, feeling shy and uncomfortable. The protagonist, unable to contain his laughter, reassured him that it was all in jest, and the group shared a light-hearted moment, celebrating his new title. They suggested that he should get a custom coat reflecting the traditional Hokage colors, which he noted he would consider. As the school day continued, the protagonist watched his classmates compete in their matches before heading home. The next day, upon entering the classroom, he noticed some classmates were anxious about not being able to attend summer camp. Despite a few students failing the practical exam, Mr. Aizawa announced that everyone would still be attending summer camp, much to their surprise. He emphasized the importance of the camp for improving their quirks, though those who had failed would face more intensive classes. During homeroom, someone proposed that the class hang out together since they had a day off the following day. Hagakure suggested a trip to the mall, and most of the class agreed, including the protagonist. The next day he arrived at the mall and greeted his classmates. They began discussing their plans, and he asked if anyone wanted to help him design some clothes. Yaoyorozu confirmed they had discussed it the previous day and offered to assist him after they picked up a bag for themselves. The three of them then entered a store, quickly finding what they wanted before searching for a boutique that specialized in custom designs. Soon, they found a shop and discussed their ideas for the coat. After finalizing a design, they presented it to the employees, who assured them it could be delivered to the Senju estate within a few days. As they left the shop, a loud alarm echoed through the mall, followed by an announcement urging everyone to evacuate quickly. Jairu voiced her concern about the situation, and Yaoyorozu suggested they regroup with their friends outside. Suddenly, Yaoyorozu's expression changed to one of panic as she read a message on her phone. When asked what was wrong, she revealed that Uraraka had texted the group chat about a close encounter with Tamura Shigaraki. The protagonist's heart raced as he recalled Shigaraki's ominous words from their last encounter, hinting at future events. Determined to find Midoriya and learn what had transpired, he reached out to his friends, asking them to hold his hands for a quicker escape. He advised them to keep their eyes closed for a moment as he activated his teleportation technique. In an instant, they arrived at the location marked on Midoriya. The scene revealed Midoriya, startled and surrounded by Uraraka, police officers, and other friends. The protagonist announced his presence, causing Midoriya to jump back in surprise, clearly still shaken from his encounter with Shigaraki. Jiro and Yaoyorozu expressed their curiosity about his teleportation ability. He explained that it was a technique developed by his ancestor, the second Hokage, Hashirama Senju. He clarified that he could only teleport to places where he had placed a special mark and could only transport items he was touching or those marked by him. He also mentioned that he had marked Midoriya prior to the sports festival, which had helped him win the race. Apologizing for startling Midoriya, he shifted the focus back to the pressing situation at hand. "Are you injured?" The concern was evident as I observed him closely. He responded that he thought he was fine, explaining that the police had checked him out. My frown deepened as I noticed something unusual about his neck. From the moment I arrived, I had sensed his irregular breathing and the cautious way he turned his head, accompanied by subtle winces of pain. These were details that only someone trained would notice. He seemed to catch my frown and asked if something was wrong. I pointed out that he had been choked and was feeling pain in his neck, feeling irritated that he had lied to me. His confused expression suggested he was taken aback by my insight. I explained that I had been raised by a top medical professional and could tell when something was off. With my medical ninjutsu, I focused my energy to heal his neck. I then urged Midoriya to share exactly what had happened. As Midoriya recounted his story, our friends wore puzzled expressions, while I processed the information, drawing my own conclusions. It was clear that a proper police questioning would be necessary. Once he finished, Officer Tsukachi approached us, informing us that they would take Midoriya to the police station and that the rest of us should head home. As the fourth Hokage, I managed to persuade Tsukachi to allow me to accompany them and assist in the questioning, knowing that my title carried certain privileges. After the questioning, Midoriya stepped outside while Tsukachi went to submit his report. I remained in the questioning room, deep in thought. Some details didn't add up, and it felt as if there were secrets being kept from me. Security cameras had captured Shigaraki's entry into the mall, revealing his path until he encountered Midoriya, supposedly by chance. However, reviewing the footage from other cameras showed that Shigaraki had passed 2 other UA students along the way. If it had truly been a chance encounter, he would have approached one of them instead of Midoriya. It was as if he knew something about Midoriya that I didn't, a suspicion I had always kept to myself. Additionally, Shigaraki's mention of All Might and his threat to end both their lives only fueled my concerns. I decided it was time to get to the bottom of this. As I left the questioning room, I spotted Midoriya and called out to him in a serious tone. When I reached him, he greeted me casually, but I maintained a cold, serious expression. After a moment of silence, he nervously asked if something was wrong. I explained that the League of Villains had targeted him, emphasizing that Shigaraki's encounter with him seemed too coincidental. I had reviewed footage showing that Shigaraki had ignored 2 other students, which raised questions about why he would specifically target Midoriya. Midoriya appeared increasingly nervous as he stammered a response, suggesting that perhaps Shigaraki didn't like how he had fought at the USJ. I speculated that Shigaraki was likely being guided by a higher authority, someone who had a vested interest in targeting Midoriya. I pointed out that Shigaraki had threatened to kill him, which only heightened my suspicions. When Midoriya hesitated to respond, I took it upon myself to answer my own question, stating that it was because he was All Might's chosen successor, a former quirkless boy who now possessed his quirk. My tone was accusatory, and I could see Midoriya sweating profusely, muttering incoherently. At that moment, Tsukachi and a weary-looking blonde man approached us. When Midoriya saw them, he exclaimed, "All Might." I looked at the 2 of them, confused, until the blonde man spoke, complimenting my investigative skills. His body then transformed into All Might's form before reverting back to his weakened state. He explained that since I had discovered his secret, I should be informed about his quirk and the individual known as All for One. I promised to keep this information confidential. The following Monday, after learning about One for All, Aizawa gathered us early in the morning to board the bus to the training camp with Class 1B. Since discovering All Might's secret, 2 significant events had occurred. My custom 4th Hokage jacket had arrived, designed to be summoned at will, and my class had enjoyed a fun day at the swimming pool, although I missed it due to studying some books Sarutobi had sent me to help me become a great Hokage. I figured everyone knew who would have won the race if I had participated. Aizawa then began explaining that the training camp would not be all fun and games, emphasizing the rigorous training we needed to take seriously. He listed room arrangements, and when he reached my name, he announced that I would be sharing a room with Midoriya, Ida, and Todoroki. Shortly after, our bus arrived, and Ida began directing our class onto it in his usual class representative manner. Once everyone was settled, Aizawa attempted to make an announcement, but his voice was drowned out by the chatter around us. I chose to sit at the back of the bus, wearing headphones to block out the noise while I read one of my books. An hour later, we disembarked from the bus, stretching and chatting amongst ourselves. Someone asked Aizawa about the nature of the rest stop we had arrived at. Aizawa provided a vague response, suggesting that if anyone thought this was meant to be a restful experience, they should reconsider. A black car then pulled up beside them, and two women emerged, introducing themselves as Mandalay and Pixie Bob. Midoriya, unable to contain his excitement, began to fanboy about their team, known as the Pussycats, but was quickly silenced by Pixie Bob. Mandalay explained that they would be staying in the forest, which made everyone uneasy as they realized they had to journey through it. She mentioned that since it was 9 a.m., they should arrive by 12 p.m. Suddenly, Pixie Bob used her quirk to create a landslide, sending everyone tumbling off the cliff, except for one individual who focused chakra to their feet to remain grounded. Mandalay remarked to Aizawa that this took care of the others, and Aizawa noted that they should head to the location themselves, although the others would likely arrive around 5 p.m., indicating that the earlier timeline was a ruse. The observer struggled to suppress laughter at the sight of everyone's expressions as they were flung off the cliff, and the fact that the others had yet to notice their presence only added to the amusement. Eventually, laughter erupted uncontrollably. The group jumped at the sound, which only intensified the laughter. They exchanged glances, and Aizawa questioned why the observer was still there. The observer explained that with their next move, they could reach the others in under 10 minutes. Drawing blood from their finger, they prepared to summon a toad, exclaiming the incantation for the summoning jutsu. However, something unexpected occurred. Instead of summoning, they found themselves face-first on the ground, having accidentally performed a reverse summoning jutsu. Looking up, they realized they were in Mount Boku, where Jiraiya and an elderly toad awaited. Jiraiya greeted them, and the observer expressed confusion about what he meant by, "finally here." Lord Fukasaku clarified that he and Jiraiya had imposed a reverse summoning when the observer attempted to summon. He revealed that the Great Lord Elder had a prophetic dream concerning the observer. Intrigued, the observer inquired about the prophecy, but Lord Fukasaku explained that even he did not know its details. Only the Great Lord Elder could share it. They were then brought before the Great Lord Elder, who began to speak of the dream. He foretold that the observer would face a significant choice that would lead to a critical evaluation, resulting in a great change that could favor either good or evil. Regardless of the choice made, it would bring misfortune to someone. After hearing this, the observer sought advice on how to make the right choice, but the Great Lord Elder could not provide answers. For the next few hours, they discussed the prophecy with Jiraiya, Lord Fukasaku, and other toads, contemplating its meaning and how to navigate the future. Lunch followed, consisting of regular food instead of unusual items. Once lunch concluded, Jiraiya announced that it was 5 p.m. and that he would take the observer back to the camp. They climbed onto Gamabunta, and with a puff of smoke, they transitioned back to the human world. Upon arrival, it appeared that everyone had just returned from the forest, looking exhausted. The sight of Gamabunta prompted a collective gasp from the students, who exclaimed about the giant toad. As the smoke cleared, Jiraiya began his grand introduction as the Great Toad Sage, but he was interrupted when Gamabunta, frustrated, demanded silence. The large toad expressed his annoyance at being summoned and threatened to swallow the observer if they did not get off his back immediately. This outburst startled the class, prompting the observer to jump off quickly. Gamabunta, declaring he did not need to be there, vanished back to Mount Boku, causing Jiraiya to fall face-first into the ground, muttering about the toad's crankiness. As Jiraiya stood up, Mr. Aizawa approached, observing the two with a bemused expression before commenting on Jiraiya's clumsiness. The students exchanged confused glances, unsure why Aizawa referred to Jiraiya as sensei. It was explained that Jiraiya had taught at UA during Aizawa's time as a student, revealing to the observer that both Orochimaru and their mother had also taught there simultaneously. The two continued to converse, with Jiraiya mentioning he needed the observer for something important. However, he was distracted by Mandalay, attempting to flirt unsuccessfully. Just as he was about to leave, he remembered something and pulled out a book, offering signed copies of his work, Make Out Paradise. He rushed toward the crowd, excitement evident as he called out for attention. Kaminari expressed his enthusiasm for Jiraiya's novels, and Jiraiya, pleased with the compliment, hinted at the possibility of an internship for Kaminari to assist with his research. Aizawa, however, observed the exchange with disappointment, fully aware of the nature of Jiraiya's work. It was clear that Kaminari would not be taking home a signed copy. After Jiraiya departed, the group headed inside for dinner. Following the meal, the class decided to unwind in the hot springs, as many felt exhausted from their long day at camp. Grateful for Jiraiya's company, I settled into a quiet corner, closing my eyes to reflect on the toad's prophecy and simply relax. My peace was abruptly interrupted by a shriek from across the room. I opened my eyes to see a boy tumbling from the wall that separated the boys and girls. Just as I prepared to summon one of my special kunai, a green flash darted past me, already intervening. Once the commotion settled, I returned to my corner to zone out until it was time to leave the hot springs about an hour later. Back in the room I shared with Todoroki, Ida, and Midoriya, we quickly showered and changed into our pajamas. As we gathered around the TV, Midoriya suddenly remembered something he had brought with him. He rummaged through his luggage and produced a small rectangular box, which turned out to be a game of Monopoly. I couldn't help but think this would lead to chaos. 2 hours later, the scene was chaotic. Todoroki had set the fake money ablaze, Ida had angrily removed his glasses and smashed them, and the game box was thrown aside. I had sliced the game board into pieces and teleported them to various marked locations. Midoriya had even broken the legs off his chair. Just then, Aizawa barged in, demanding to know what was happening. Clearly, our little game had spiraled out of control. The next day marked the beginning of our intense training. Aizawa assigned each student individual goals and methods for improvement. For me, he decided there was no specific regimen needed, allowing me to train as I saw fit, even if it meant reading the books Sarutobi had given me. I chose to focus on incorporating lightning release into my flying Fujin technique to enhance my speed while flying. I also aimed to sustain and utilize my Sage Mode techniques. After hours of hard work, dinner time arrived, but the Pussycats had insisted that from now on, students would prepare the meals. This news disappointed many, as they were exhausted. I chuckled to myself, thinking it was the perfect opportunity to try something I had been practicing. Using my flying Raijin technique, I marked a spot on the ground and teleported to my favorite restaurant for a quick meal. After enjoying my favorite dish, I returned to camp, where most of my classmates had finished eating something that looked less than appetizing. I turned around to find an irritated Aizawa, his eyes glowing and hair floating. He scolded me for using my quirk without permission and reminded me that I was supposed to help with dinner. I responded that as Hokage, I had the authority to override his commands to a certain extent, which only served to further frustrate him. The following evening, the day unfolded similarly to the previous one, except this time, I actually assisted with dinner preparations. Soon, the Pussycats gathered us for a competition between Class 1A and 1B. We were tasked with using our quirks creatively to scare the opposing class, and I was paired with Midoriya. I wore a dark blue sweatshirt and sweatpants, along with a green flak jacket that held my tools. As we prepared to enter the forest, a terrifying sight unfolded before us. The entire forest was ablaze, with pink smoke billowing in one area. Sensing something was amiss, I quickly donned my Hokage coat. While everyone took in the alarming scene, Pixie Bob was suddenly flung across the clearing toward a figure wielding a large pole. Anticipating the danger, I formed a Rasengan and hurled a kunai at the assailant, teleporting to their location just in time to slam them with my technique. I then grabbed Pixie Bob and teleported both of us back to our classmates, who were now on high alert. A crocodile man approached the large figure and remarked on the rudeness of my actions. The figure introduced themselves as Spinner and their companion as Magna, revealing they were part of the Vanguard Action Squad for the League of Villains. Understanding the gravity of the situation, I prepared myself for the confrontation ahead. With the villains now identified, Mandalay stepped in front of me and the rest of my classmates, urging everyone to return to camp. These were real villains and we needed to be cautious. Tiger, Pixie Bob, and I would handle the situation. She shouted her determination as Ida gathered everyone and led the other students back to camp. Tiger engaged Magna while Mandalay and Pixie Bob confronted Spinner. I remained in the clearing, closing my eyes to concentrate my sensory abilities, searching for students in the forest and assessing the fire and smoke. Once I identified these issues, 5 wood clones emerged from my body and scattered 3 for search and rescue, 1 to manage the smoke, and the last to extinguish the fire. Midoriya rushed back to the clearing, catching Mandalay's attention. He informed her that he knew where Kota was and could find him. After a moment of hesitation, she encouraged him to go ahead. Midoriya dashed off, and Mandalay turned her focus to me, questioning why I was still there. I turned my back to her, pointing at the lettering on my jacket, declaring that I had been entrusted with the title of the 4th Hokage. It was my responsibility to protect everyone, and I would do so regardless of the consequences. At that moment, a young man with facial scars emerged from the forest, introducing himself and revealing that I was at the top of Shigaraki's priority kill list. He whistled, summoning a large Nomu that appeared more humanoid and powerful than the one I had faced at the UFA. It wore armor reminiscent of Hashirama's. The man explained that this Nomu was created specifically to eliminate me, using my DNA to enhance its strength. He hinted that I had bled during the previous encounter, and Kurogyari had collected what he could, leaving me to deduce the rest. He instructed the other 2 villains to take their fight elsewhere, indicating that significant destruction was imminent. As he melted into sludge, I waited for the others to move away, and surprisingly, even the Noma held back, likely waiting for a command to engage me. Then, to my astonishment, the Nomu spoke in a deep, menacing voice, declaring that it was created by All for One to ensure my death and that it was genetically superior. I resolved to prove otherwise. I scattered marked kunai around the field, preparing for my attack. Wood style, Wood Golem. I summoned my Wood Golem and engaged the Nomu in combat, exchanging powerful blows. From the perspective of one of my Wood clones, I had located the source of the pink dust that seemed to be a villain's quirk. It was moving erratically, likely due to students confronting the user. Approached and saw Kendo blowing the dust away while Tetsu charged at the villain. As the villain pulled out a gun, I infused chakra into a marked kunai and threw it, shattering the weapon. Just as Tetsu's fist connected with the villain's face, I teleported in and struck with a Rasengan, knocking the villain out. I congratulated Kendo and Tetsu on their efforts, but they were startled by my sudden appearance. After introducing myself, I explained the situation and how I was a Wood clone created to defend against the villains. Back in the original perspective, I continued my battle with the Nomu. The strength of my Wood Golem matched its own, making my efforts seem futile. I needed a new strategy. I leaped off my Wood Golem and threw a marked kunai at the Nomu, teleporting in front of it to unleash my Sage Art, Massive Rasengan. The concentrated chakra overwhelmed the beast, damaging its right side significantly. As I turned to walk away, I confidently remarked that the scarred man had been bluffing about the Nomu's strength. Suddenly, I heard the cold voice of the Nomu behind me, warning that my carelessness would lead to my downfall. It had completely healed and was ready to strike. Meanwhile, another Wood clone reached the edge of the forest fire, preparing to extinguish it with powerful water-style techniques. I needed to be cautious, as a strong jutsu could flood the area. I decided on a low-risk rainfall technique, allowing the rain to gradually diminish the flames while I targeted the most intense areas with stronger water techniques. Back in my original form, I narrowly avoided the Nomu strike by teleporting away. Despite the time spent battling, the Nomu remained resilient. I had been conserving my chakra, saving my strongest techniques for a critical moment. I continued to direct my wood golem in combat while launching various jutsu from a distance, including shadow clone Rasengan barrages. Suddenly, I heard Mandalay's voice in my head, using her telepathic abilities to relay urgent information. She informed everyone that the villains were after a student named Kaken and warned him to avoid confrontation. She also announced that Eraserhead had granted permission for us to engage the enemy. This was troubling news. If Kaken was a target, I needed to reach him quickly. I resolved to end my battle with the Nomu and move forward. Forget about conserving chakra. It was time to use this jutsu to end things here and now. The wood style, true several thousand hands technique was unleashed. Standing atop the giant wood golem, thousands of wooden arms sprouted from its back, towering over the Nomu and making it appear small in comparison. In an instant, every single wooden arm launched forward, striking the Nomu repeatedly. What began as one strike quickly escalated to 100, then a few thousand direct hits. The sheer force of the jutsu created a massive crater, and a thick dust cloud enveloped the area. As the dust settled, movement from the Nomu caught my eye. It struggled to rise, albeit shakily, clearly weakened by the attack. Attempting to charge at me, it faltered and collapsed forward, clearly knocked out. Jumping off the golem, I approached the Nomu, confirming it wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. Despite sharing my DNA, it was evident that the original was far superior. To ensure it remained incapacitated, I decided to use another jutsu. The Sage Art, Gracious Deity Gates technique was activated, and once the gates landed on top of the Nomu, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Those gates were more than strong enough to hold it down, preventing any chance of escape. Moreover, they would continuously drain the beast's energy, ensuring it remained subdued. With that taken care of, it was time to find Bokugu. I sat down, closed my eyes, and clasped my hands together to concentrate. Activating my sensory abilities, I scanned the forest for Bokugu. I sensed that the fire was not spreading and was being extinguished, with no poisonous dust in the air. Finally, I pinpointed his location. Bokugu was deep in the forest with Todoroki, engaged in a defensive struggle against a powerful villain. Realizing they might not stand a chance, I prepared to head over immediately but first checked for a nearby wood clone. Fortunately, one was available. I sent a chakra signal to it, directing it to Bokugu's location. Suddenly, I sensed something large and powerful rapidly approaching Bokugu and Todoroki. It was Tokoyami, but it seemed his dark shadow had completely taken over. In front of him were Midoriya and Shoji, seemingly leading Dark Shadow toward Bokugu and Todoroki. Midoriya had likely realized that he could protect Bokugu while also repressing Dark Shadow. Both Todoroki and Bokugu had quirks that countered Dark Shadow effectively. It was a clever strategy. With that in mind, I decided to teleport to Midoriya, as I still had him marked. However, my teleportation failed. Something must have happened to him that erased my mark. Focusing on his physical condition, I sensed he was in terrible shape, both arms broken and muscle fibers torn. He shouldn't even be able to walk with such injuries. It seemed he had encountered a powerful villain that pushed him beyond his limits, likely using 100% of One for All's power, which his body wasn't accustomed to. The sudden surge of power probably caused my mark to fade. There was no time to dwell on this. I had to reach them as quickly as possible. I jumped up and began flying in their direction using the flying Fujin Jutsu. From the perspective of the wood clone, I was almost there. I could see Dark Shadow battling the villain that Bokugu and Todoroki had faced. The villain was being overwhelmed by Dark Shadow, who was breaking his teeth one by one. The villain was flung a considerable distance, crashing into a tree, unable to rise again. Dark Shadow then turned its attention to the 4 students in front of him, preparing to attack, but was being weakened by explosions and fire. Despite this, Dark Shadow clung to its strength and acted aggressively. I had to intervene before things escalated further. I threw a kunai between Dark Shadow and the students, then teleported directly in front of it, extending my palm. Using the Hokage style, 10th Edict of Enlightenment, my hand made contact with Dark Shadow, and I jumped back. A chakra chain connected my hand to Dark Shadow, while 8 wooden pillars rose from the ground, surrounding it. The pillars drained Dark Shadow's power until Tokoyami regained control. Tokoyami was back to himself. He expressed his gratitude. He felt remorse for losing control and causing harm to Shoji. He acknowledged his anger had led to Dark Shadow taking over, leaving him feeling immature and sad. Todoroki pointed out that it had taken everything he and Bokugo had to hold the villain back, but Tokoyami had defeated him in an instant, thus helping them both. I reassured Tokoyami that he shouldn't feel down. It was not his fault he lost control. His reaction showed how much he cared for Shoji and everyone else. I apologized for not arriving sooner, explaining that my real body was on its way. I had been occupied with search and rescue but was directed to this location. Midoriya, confused, asked what I meant by real body. I clarified that I was just a wood clone but emphasized the urgency of the situation regarding Bokugo. According to Mandalay's message, Bokugo was being targeted by the League and we needed to protect him at all costs. With Midoriya confirming Bokugo's status as a target, we began discussing strategies to ensure his safety. It was agreed that they would head to camp directly through the forest, with both MN and Tokoyami protecting Bokugo from the back while the other 3 guarded him from the front. Thus, they began their trek through the forest. A villain observed them from a distance, thinking that these young heroes believed they could protect Bokugo. He couldn't allow that and planned to use his magic to take Bokugo for himself. First, he needed to deal with the Hokage, who had surprisingly survived an encounter with a Nomu. He decided to handle the Hokage before capturing Bokugo, and if luck was on his side, he would also take Tokoyami. M. North was close to the group, keeping track of their location. Suddenly, he noticed that his wood clone, Bokugo, and Tokoyami were together, but he couldn't sense their life signatures. Concentrating further, he realized their location coincided with another presence of villain, no doubt, who must have some sort of shrinking quirk. He decided to double his speed toward the threat. As he advanced, he sensed Midoriya and the others heading in the same direction, along with 3 other life signatures, likely other villains. Everyone was converging in the same area, and MN emerged from the forest, ready to confront the enemy. Just then, he felt his facial features, enhanced by sage energy, beginning to fade. He was losing control of sage art at a critical moment. The villain, who bore scars on his face, commanded his companions to leave with their prize. Just as they were about to escape, a laser beam shot from the bushes, striking the villain's mask and causing him to cough up 3 crystals. 2 flew in one direction while the other went toward the scarred man. MN quickly threw his kunai in the direction of the 2 crystals and managed to catch them. Todoroki attempted to retrieve the 3rd crystal, but the villain caught it and pushed him away, taunting him. The villain then confirmed that they had Bokugo. In that moment, Bokugo, Tokoyami, and a block of ice emerged from the crystal. The villains had Bokugo, not the ice block. Anger surged through MN as he charged at the villain holding Bokugo, kunai in hand. He attempted to slash at him but was knocked away. Distracted, the villain was struck by MN's kunai, which lodged deep in his shoulder. The villain hissed in pain and retreated through the portal, taking Bokugo with him. MN turned around, tears in his eyes, to see his friends frozen in shock, fear and panic etched on their faces. He dropped to his knees, slamming his fists into the ground, overwhelmed by despair. Time seemed to stretch as they stood there, feeling like fools who couldn't protect their friend. An indescribable sense of regret and sorrow weighed heavily on them. No one spoke, except for a few cries from those who witnessed Bokugo's abduction. Aizawa emerged from the woods, confusion and concern evident on his face. He demanded to know what had happened. Midoriya stammered, unable to finish his sentence as tears streamed down his face. MN explained that Bokugo had been taken by the villains through Kurogiri's warp gate. Shock registered on Aizawa's face as he struggled to process the situation. He promised that they would discuss the details later but assured them they would get Bokugo back. He instructed everyone to follow him back to camp. MN, feeling a surge of panic, asked if many people had been injured. Aizawa confirmed that several had inhaled poison gas and others had sustained serious injuries. MN realized he had no choice but to use his forbidden jutsu, even if it could cost him dearly. He felt he had failed as Hokage. He couldn't protect Bokugu, but he could help those around him. He instructed one of them to prepare to carry him back to camp, explaining that he wouldn't be able to walk. As he sat on the ground, crisscrossed, concentrating his chakra, his friends looked at him in confusion. When Todoroki questioned what he was doing, MN explained that he was using a forbidden jutsu that redistributed his vitality to those in need of healing. It was a powerful technique, but it came at a significant cost to him. Suddenly, a blue aura manifested around him, shooting into Midoriya and healing his injuries. MN felt his energy draining as he continued to channel his vitality into everyone who needed it. He could feel himself growing weaker by the second. 2 days later, MN awoke in a hospital bed, tubes attached to him. Despite everything, he felt strangely energized. He wondered how long he had been there. After reflecting on the events for about 30 minutes, he was interrupted by All Might, who entered alongside Officer Tsukachi. All Might greeted him with enthusiasm, expressing relief that he was awake and asking how he felt. MN replied that he felt fine but needed to know what was happening with Bokugu. They filled him in on the ongoing investigation, revealing that the police had made significant progress in their efforts to locate Bokugu. They had narrowed down 2 locations to target. The discovery of a kunai, which had been thrown at the villain who took Bokugu, in the vicinity provided further evidence that the villains were hiding in these areas. A meeting was scheduled for the next day at 6 p.m. to discuss the rescue plan among the police and other heroes. As Hokage, I was invited to join, especially since my quickly devised defensive strategy at the camp had proven to be highly effective. My presence was deemed beneficial for the operation. After everyone left, I remained in the room, contemplating what could be done. Ideas and strategies for the rescue began to form in my mind, but one thing was clear: All for One had to be dealt with. As long as he was around, situations like this would continue to arise. I needed to think things through before the meeting. Seeking advice from someone more experienced seemed wise, but I wasn't sure who to approach. Shortly after being discharged and sent home, I was welcomed with a large meal prepared by my mother and Jiraiya. The next day, at the Senju estate field, it was noon, and the meeting was still 6 hours away. I hadn't had the chance to gather my thoughts or seek guidance. Defeating All for One once and for all was my priority. Conversations with my mom and Jiraiya hadn't yielded much insight. Simply arresting him wouldn't suffice, and while I could consider a more permanent solution, I knew that could lead to serious consequences. There were 2 individuals I thought might have the answers I needed, but both were deceased. Fortunately, I had sought out Orochimaru to help summon them. Having only summoned them once before, I was sure they would be curious about what had transpired since then. I donned my 4th Hokage cloak and hat, then began weaving the necessary hand signs for the jutsu. With a firm slam of my hand to the ground, I called forth the reanimation jutsu. 2 coffins emerged, and as they fully surfaced, 2 figures stepped out, slowly regaining consciousness. One of them, Tobirama, recognized the situation. He noted that it was the reanimation jutsu again, and that it was his descendants' doing. Hashirama, upon seeing the Hokage headpiece, immediately brightened up, eager to learn about my journey and achievements. However, Tobirama interrupted, urging his brother to allow me to explain the reason for their summoning. Hashirama's enthusiasm quickly faded, and Tobirama insisted that I answer a few questions before delving into the purpose of my summoning. I shared the story of how I became Hiruzen's successor and my victory at the sports festival. I spoke of my growth in strength and the development of the jutsu Tobirama had taught me, which seemed to please him. As I recounted my experiences, Hashirama's spirits lifted once more. Then I detailed the League's attack on the camp, describing how they had sent numerous villains to assault us. I explained my quick counterattack and the risks I took while using my healing jutsu, despite ultimately failing to protect someone. I introduced them to the villain All for One, elaborating on his quirk and the terrible deeds he had committed. I expressed my need for a way to defeat him. Tobirama assessed my situation and remarked that I had already proven myself as a capable strategist, much like him. He acknowledged that All for One was the source of my troubles. He reminisced about the many jutsus he had created, explaining that each had a specific purpose. He revealed that he had developed a jutsu designed to seal and destroy quirks, which he considered forbidden unless certain conditions were met. All for One met those requirements, and Tobirama offered to teach me this jutsu. The process of learning this dangerous jutsu was surprisingly straightforward. Tobirama summoned ancient-looking boxes and instructed me to infuse one with my chakra. He explained that if All for One's blood came into contact with the box, the jutsu's prerequisites would be fulfilled. With his DNA, I could perform the sealing jutsu, rendering All for One quirkless. He assured me that as long as a quirk was sealed within a box, it would be indestructible and only I could destroy it, resulting in the quirk's annihilation. Tobirama recommended that I destroy the box immediately after sealing the quirk. Although I couldn't test the jutsu on someone, he guaranteed it would work if I followed his instructions. After thanking them, I desummoned the two figures as they wished me good luck and prepared to head to the meeting. I arrived at the meeting right on time, surrounded by numerous police officers and pro-heroes, wearing my fourth Hokage cloak and traditional headpiece. Once everyone had gathered, the discussion about the plan to rescue Bokugo commenced. The police had identified two confirmed hideouts of the League of Villains. They had determined that Bokugo was being held in one of these locations, while the other served as a Nomu factory. After extensive deliberation, it was decided that Best Jeanist would lead a team of heroes and police to raid the Nomu factory, while All Might would lead a capable team to rescue Bokugo. Although the plan was solid, there was a sense that it could be enhanced. A strategy was proposed to mislead the villains into thinking they were several steps ahead, which would lower their guard and simultaneously boost public support for UA. It was suggested that, in the hour leading up to Bokugo's rescue operation, UA's faculty hold a press conference to convey the misfortune of the situation while highlighting the speaker's contributions, which had not yet been made public. Principal Nizu, Mr. Aizawa, and Vlad King would act as if they were unaware of the developments, creating a false sense of security for the villains. Additionally, a clone would be sent to announce the speaker as the fourth Hokage and deliver an inspiring speech. The proposal was met with agreement, and it was also suggested that the speaker place a mark on both All Might and Best Jeanist to act as backup if necessary. The speaker would remain at headquarters to oversee the team's progress through drones and manage communication, acting as a sensory guide to inform both teams of any sudden changes regarding Bokugo or other villains. The next day at police headquarters, the UA press conference was nearing its conclusion. The Wood clone took the stage, revealing the speaker as the fourth Hokage and delivering an inspiring speech about determination, justice, and the commitment to securing a brighter future. The speech concluded with a promise to find Bokugo and bring all villains to justice. The speaker turned to the police officers and heroes, expressing satisfaction with how the event had unfolded. It was time to initiate the rescue. The intercom system was activated, and the speaker instructed both teams to mobilize with their respective leaders. As the teams began their assignments, updates started coming in. Live drone footage showed that each team's operations were proceeding smoothly. Officer Tsukachi reported that All Might and the other heroes had commenced their raid to save Bokugo, while Best Jeanist confirmed that the Nomu factory was secured. However, an alarming event occurred when the Nomu factory suddenly collapsed due to a powerful shockwave. Debris and smoke obscured the view, making it difficult to ascertain what had happened. Attempts to communicate with Best Jeanist's team were met with silence, as signals appeared to be blocked. The speaker resolved to inform All Might of the situation. Sensing something unusual in Team 1's area, the speaker detected swarms of Nomu teleporting there. A communication was sent to Team 1, warning them of the imminent threat and instructing them to eliminate the incoming Nomu. Live footage revealed Nomu emerging from a gray sludge. Communication from Gran Torino indicated that the villains and Bokugo had been engulfed in the same sludge. The speaker concentrated and pinpointed their location, realizing they were still at the Nomu factory, accompanied by a powerful and malevolent presence, presumed to be All for One. The mission for Team 2 had failed, and All Might needed to be dispatched to that location immediately, with the other heroes assisting him afterward. Moments later, All Might arrived at the scene, confronting All for One. They exchanged words before launching into a fierce battle. All Might unleashed a flurry of punches, while All for One countered each attack. It became evident that All Might was holding back, as he could not risk Bokugu's safety. The fight escalated, causing significant destruction as buildings crumbled under the force of their blows. There was no opportunity for All Might to reach Bokugu, prompting the speaker to consider intervening personally. Stepping out of the command room, the speaker changed into red armor and donned a cloak before returning to the command center. Unexpectedly, a massive wall of ice emerged, revealing Midoriya, Kirishima, and Ida soaring through the air. A tremendous explosion propelled Bokugu toward them, and they successfully caught him before escaping into the night. A smile crept onto the speaker's face, recognizing their determination and the legacy they carried. With Bokugu safe, All Might could now fight more aggressively against All for One. However, the tide of battle began to shift, and it was clear that All Might was growing weaker, struggling to maintain his strength. After several minutes, All Might fell to his knees, steam rising from his body, signaling a critical moment in the confrontation. Once the steam cleared, a defeated and desperate man remained. In a fit of anger, the protagonist smashed his fist against a computer, shattering it completely. He then pointed at one of the officers, declaring that while he was away, that officer would be the commanding officer. With a swift hand sign, he teleported away. He reappeared right in front of All Might, locking eyes with All for One. He turned slightly, placing a hand on All Might's shoulder and teleporting him back to base, leaving only himself and the notorious villain. All for One acknowledged him, recognizing the protagonist as the fourth Hokage, MN Senju. Just as he was about to eliminate All Might, MN had arrived, prompting All for One to shift his focus to him. MN quickly threw a marked kunai at All for One and teleported behind him, striking with a powerful Rasengan. As All for One stumbled forward, MN seized the kunai and threw it in front of him. He teleported again, delivering a Rasengan to All for One's face, sending him reeling back. MN then infused his leg with chakra and performed the summoning jutsu, triple Rashomons. 3 massive structures emerged from the ground behind All for One. MN leaped in front of him and delivered a strong kick to his chest, propelling him through each Rashomon and creating a cloud of smoke. Standing atop the last Rashomon, MN declared that All for One was gravely mistaken. He would not allow the villain to walk free any longer. MN presented him with 2 options: surrender now or face dire consequences. Suddenly, a strange tendril of red and black broke through the smoke and lunged at MN. Just before it could strike, he threw his kunai to the ground and teleported. As he prepared to hit All for One with another Rasengan, he was caught off guard by a massive burst of pressurized air that sent him flying. Upon hitting the ground, All for One was already upon him, his arm covered in spikes as he shouted defiantly. MN evaded the attack by using the substitution jutsu, causing All for One to strike a block of wood instead. He then unleashed his own jutsu, water style, Water Dragon Jutsu, which collided with All for One's air cannon, creating a miniature hurricane that sent droplets of water flying everywhere. They charged at each other, MN wielding a Rasengan and All for One with a spiked attack. Their jutsu collided, creating sparks and sending both combatants back. MN then created 6 wood clones, each armed with a Rasengan, and sent them at All for One. The clones leaped and struck him simultaneously. All for One roared in frustration as he fought off the wood clones. Taking advantage of his distraction, MN summoned the Wood Dragon Jutsu. The dragon emerged from the ground and quickly wrapped around All for One, constricting him like an anaconda before throwing him a great distance, striking the ground with powerful force. In retaliation, multiple red tendrils shot through the air, piercing the wood dragon and tearing it apart. MN resolved to finish the battle. He joined his hands together, absorbing nature energy and invoking Sage Mode. The massive wooden structure began to rise beneath him. Once complete, he unleashed his jutsu, Sage Art, True Several Thousand Hands. Hundreds of wooden hands surged forward, striking where All for One had been. As the wooden hands made contact, MN summoned another wood dragon to wrap around All for One. He sent a wood clone to stab All for One's shoulder, collecting the blood that spilled into a glass. He then addressed All for One, stating that he had given him the choice to surrender, but now it was clear he would not listen to reason. MN condemned All for One as an abomination who toyed with lives for his own twisted schemes. MN summoned one of the ancient boxes he possessed and poured All for One's blood into it, declaring that he would now take away his quirk. The box began to glow red as an aura radiated from All for One into it. This process continued until his quirk was completely absorbed, leaving the box glowing with red lines. As MN released All for One from the wood dragon, the villain stumbled forward, desperately attempting to activate his quirk but failing. He tried to attack, but his efforts were in vain. Eventually, he gave up and sat silently. MN then performed the Vitalic Redistribution Jutsu, glowing with a blue aura that shot into the air, reaching those in need of healing. He ensured that no one would perish from the catastrophe and created numerous wood clones to assist in search and rescue efforts. Soon, police and media arrived at the scene. The police placed All for One in chains and transported him in a SWAT vehicle, while the media captured footage of MN. Cheers erupted from the crowd, and he raised his right hand in victory. Turning dramatically, he pointed to the lettering on his block that read, "Fourth Hokage." He then etched a message onto a kunai and threw it to the side, prompting every camera to zoom in on it as he raised his hand once more. For dramatic effect, he teleported away, leaving only the kunai behind, which bore the message, "I won't back down, I'm coming." A clear warning to the League of Villains. Ever since the defeat of All for One, the police force and MN had worked tirelessly to locate the League of Villains before they could regroup and rebuild their ranks. Eventually, the police became aware of a meeting scheduled to take place at an abandoned warehouse. Information indicated that this was a gathering between the League of Villains and the Shai Hasaikai, two of the largest organized crime groups. On the night of the meeting, MN stormed the warehouse alone and confronted them. Both factions fought against MN with fierce determination, unleashing their full power. However, they were no match for him, as MN had already surpassed the strength of Hashirama Senju. One by one, the villains fell until only Shigaraki and Overhaul remained. Eventually, they too were brought down. The police arrived shortly after, detaining every single villain and effectively dismantling both the League of Villains and the Shai Hasaikai in a single night. News outlets reported on the event, highlighting MN's pivotal role in the operation, which resulted in a significant increase in his popularity and approval ratings. With the defeat of All for One and the two major criminal organizations, MN claimed the #1 spot on the Billboard Hero charts, marking the first time in history that a new hero debuted at #1. Under MN's leadership, the world entered an unprecedented era of peace, innovation, and prosperity. Most crime, if not all, had been completely eradicated. For the rest of his life, MN would maintain his position as the #1 hero, with no other hero coming close to claiming that title. He would be remembered as the greatest hero to ever live, surpassing even All Might and Hashirama Senju.